We begin with a beautiful view of the 4th Academy in the city of Su. Director Shujin Long announces that today is the day students will become players, and the system will assign them a class. It could be a swordsman, a knight, an assassin, or a mage. Then, a magic circle activates beneath the student's feet. This boy's name is Xiao Yu, and he says it has been 18 years since he was reincarnated. This world is called Kaiji, a parallel world that's very similar to Earth. The only difference is that in this world there are dungeons, and when humans turn 18, they receive abilities to use and clear those dungeons. Upon entering the portal, which they call the inner world, he prays that a good class will be granted to him. A voice asks if this is his first time there, and he replies that it is. After a brief loading screen, a skull wrapped in shadows circles around the boy, and a message appears stating that a secret class has been granted. The name of this class is NECROMANCER. The boy is amazed by such news. A NECROMANCER is an extremely rare class. Only 1 or 2 people in the entire history of the world have ever received it. With a single swing of his weapon, countless high-ranking skeletons can be summoned, and as long as he has mana, he becomes a one-man army. The protagonist says that, in general, receiving a rare class means your stats will be much stronger. But when he checks, he sees that he has 0 spirit. He is stunned. How can someone with the Necromancer class have 0 spirit? Initial attributes are distributed randomly, with 10 being the highest, and spirit is the most important stat for a Necromancer. He had the bad luck of getting 0. The system announces that it's time to generate a random talent as well, but the protagonist is so shaken that not even an S-rank talent could save him. The system then finally grants him the talent, Brave Heart of a Mage, of unknown grade. This talent gave him an attribute point every time he defeated an enemy using physical attacks, allowing him to boost 1 basic attribute at a time. This was even more incredible since attributes were usually gained only by leveling up, and now he could earn them through battle. With this talent, he could potentially max out all his attributes. As a novice, he now had the potential to reach the maximum in each one, a truly formidable player. He considered maxing out his stats before using this ability, turning himself into an unstoppable force. Since physical attacks were needed to trigger the passive ability, strength became his top priority, so he allocated all 10 points to strength. With 20 points in strength, his vigor was now far above average. With that done, he had to complete the beginner's task to finalize the acquisition of his class. He was teleported to the location of the task. There, he stood before a portal, accompanied by a young woman. She was his guide, Elaine, assigned to assist him if needed. He told her he was there to register and complete his first beginner's mission. She was happy to help and gave him a gift for beginners. He received an old cloak, a beginner's staff, and a book that taught him how to summon skeletons. The cloak was an accessory, and the staff was useless to him due to his lack of spirit. However, with 20 points in strength, the staff made an excellent club. He was ready to learn about his first task. His mission was to escape alive from the misty cavern. He had to be quick, careful, and avoid destroying any skeletal soldiers. Though Elaine hadn't finished explaining the consequences, he had already entered the portal before she could finish her sentence. Inside, he walked deeper into the cavern, which was filled with piles of bones. Only now did he realize she had been trying to tell him something important. He hadn't thought it would be so difficult and was overwhelmed by the sheer number of skeletons. It didn't take long before one saw him as an enemy and attacked. The sound of its approach alerted him. The skeleton was a level 1 monster with 5 strength and 1 agility. His staff was already in hand, ready to be used as a club. The two were about to clash. A single strike from him was devastating. The skeleton couldn't withstand it. Its head fell to the ground, lifeless. He checked to confirm it was truly dead. Not being able to use magic made things more difficult. For that kill, he gained 1 attribute point, 3 experience points, and an A-rank passive ability, Miracle of the Mighty. Each of his strength points could now be converted into 2 attack points. Strength determined attack and defense, reducing incoming damage. With his passive ability, his strength was effectively doubled for attack purposes. Against an enemy with no defense, he could now deal 42 damage in a single hit, simply absurd. While he was still thinking, several skeletal hands began emerging from the ground. The skeletons were ready to strike with their knives, as if performing a sinister dance. Upon seeing them, he decided to focus on completing the task. The group moved in, eager to finish what the first skeleton could not. As they approached, ready to strike, a single swing of his staff rendered them undead once more. He earned 4 more attribute points and 12 experience points. He also leveled up, earning 5 additional attribute points, bringing his total strength to 30 points. A beginner genius typically had only 10. This felt far too easy, and he began to wonder if the skeletons were merely there to let him level up without any real effort. It didn't take long before more skeletons began to rise from the ground. This time, it was a level 3 captain with 15 strength and 20 defense, strong enough to cause serious trouble if it managed to land a hit. However, with only 1 agility, it was highly unlikely it could strike him. His first staff attack was blocked by the skeleton's shield. After defending, the skeleton countered, striking the ground where the player had stood. Not only was the movement precise, but the blow was powerful enough to create a hole in the ground. Knowing the skeleton was slower, he spotted an opening in its defense. This time, the staff struck its unprotected ribs. The hit made the skeleton lose balance and fall, giving him a clear chance for a solid blow. Exhilarated, he taunted the skeleton to try and block this one. The staff came down like a police baton on an unaware target's back. He earned 3 more attribute points and 10 experience points. That had been harder than expected, and he couldn't imagine how other players were getting through this. Then he remembered what Director Jin Long had said about monsters sometimes dropping their cores, which granted random rewards. Now he was curious to see what this one would drop. It turned out to be consumable gloves that guaranteed the next strike would be a critical hit, though they could only be used once. While standing still and analyzing the item, more skeletons began to emerge from the ground. He certainly didn't expect more enemies to show up, and with each rising skeleton, even more followed. Even though he was now level 2, he only had 20 health points and needed to be cautious. Still, with his overwhelming strength, dealing with these monsters was too easy, and he earned another 10 attribute points. Thankfully, the skeletons only had 1 agility point, which made them slow. He decided to check his attribute window. At level 3, his strength had already reached 46 points. Outside, the students were discussing the classes they had received. Some would make their parents proud. Director Jin Long remained silent, seemingly waiting for one last student to finish the test. No one could understand how it was taking so long. After all, the task was just to run, and the skeletons were slow. Among the students, someone who knew him was growing concerned. Inside the cavern, he wondered if the skeletons were finally done, and why there was still no notification about the task's completion. Then, a haunting voice echoed, asking how he dared. His attention snapped to the source of the voice. Skulls began levitating around the cave. They started flying, and the boy had to dodge them. In front of him, bones were assembling, forming something larger. Shadows resembling flames rose from the ground. Now standing before him was a terrifying creature, clearly more dangerous than anything that had appeared so far. It was the Skeleton King, already injured but still boasting 45 strength, 60 defense, and abilities such as piercing bone and explosive bone. A boss like this in a beginner's task was excessive, and he began to wonder if Director Jin Long intended for the students to become just memories. The Skeleton King prepared to strike first. The initial attack missed the young man. He was lucky to dodge. Had it landed, he likely wouldn't be alive. His advantage lay in the king's lack of agility, but the real question was whether he could break through such high defense. There was only one way to find out. His first strike landed on an exposed part of the skeleton. The blow dealt 32 points of damage. It had worked. Now he only had to repeat that 10 more times. Motivated, he launched a flurry of attacks on the Skeleton King. With its low agility, there wasn't much it could do to avoid being hit. After being struck repeatedly, the king collapsed to the ground, exhausted. The young man wondered why the boss was already down when it still had 200 health points left. That's when something unexpected occurred. It was the first time the Skeleton King had seen someone make it through the cavern using only physical strikes. If it still had its minions, it wouldn't have been this weakened. A mere novice had managed to breach its defense. It couldn't allow this player to leave the place alive. Suddenly, the Skeleton King grew even stronger. It began tracking the player's movements and was ready to counterattack. Now, it was visibly faster. It launched another attack, and the player narrowly dodged it. He was still the more agile of the two, but things were getting riskier. Head-on attacks wouldn't be as effective anymore. He needed to adapt to the Skeleton King's new speed. The monster struck again. Then, the player noticed a boulder, unstable and ready to fall. As he dodged the attack, he moved closer to it. The two locked eyes, silently analyzing each other. The player deliberately provoked the Skeleton King, urging it to attack him at that spot. The provocation worked. The king prepared to strike. Their first clash was blocked using the staff. However, the force of the blow sent the player flying, costing him 26 health points. Even though it was just a shove, he was left with only 4 health points. The Skeleton King, unsatisfied, kept advancing, determined to end the fight. The player knew that even the slightest hit would be fatal. The monster struck again, heedless of its surroundings. Just as it completed its attack, rocks from the cave ceiling began falling directly onto its head. That small collapse cost it 70 health points. Now, it struggled to free itself from the trap with only 129 health points remaining. Seeing it trapped, the player decided to seize the opportunity to end it quickly, knowing he couldn't afford to continue the fight with so little health left. Motivated, he prepared to finish everything with a single blow. He equipped the single-use gloves that guaranteed his next attack would be a critical hit. This time, he wouldn't use the staff. He was going to rely on his fists. The skeleton watched its adversary, completely powerless. A powerful punch was delivered, destroying part of the cave floor. The flames surrounding the skeleton began to fade away slowly. Finally, the system announced that he had completed the task. As a reward for being the first to defeat the boss, he received 30 attribute points. For having defeated it barehanded, he earned an additional 10 points, 50 experience points, and 3 levels. Additionally, he received the Skeleton King's ring, which he hadn't expected. When used, the next attack deals 50% additional damage with a cooldown of a full day. It's a good item because it's reusable and a Class C item, meaning he could sell it for a significant value. He was intrigued that he was the first to defeat the Skeleton King and wanted to know how others managed to pass that test, but it no longer mattered. He just wanted to leave. Now, he had 76 strength points with the brave heart of the mage talent and the skill Muscle Makes Miracles. Finally, he appeared outside among the other students. His friend Yang hugged him joyfully, relieved after worrying about his delay. Yang wanted to know why it took him so long since everyone else completed it quickly, leaving him even more surprised. It had been 3 hours since the last person finished the task. He then asked Yang about his class. Proudly, Yang said he was now a mage. It was strange, as if they hadn't entered the same world. A snob approached Xiao, saying he was the last to complete the task. Mafai was the pest's name, and he said the protagonist was just a fool, asking if he wanted to know what his class was. Xiao wondered why this guy loved to pick on him. It was like dealing with a silly child. It didn't take long for the director to address everyone, announcing that training would start tomorrow and students should now present their classes and talents. Some of them introduced themselves enthusiastically, while others were less so, as they had low-ranked talents. A girl said that besides being a mage, she was also a healer. Her name was Xiao Ju. Another said she was a paladin with a B-rank talent. The annoying Mafe was a swordsman with a B-rank talent as well. Some students began stroking his ego, since a swordsman is a very good class. Thinking to himself, the director realized that with B-rank talent, some of them could become remarkable. Now it was Xiao's turn to present himself. He announced he was a necromancer, but before saying what his talent was, he stopped speaking. It wasn't convenient to reveal his talent. The truth is, even he didn't know what it was. The director was quite pleased because a necromancer is a secret class. The students were even more surprised because a necromancer once wiped an entire union off the face of the earth. Mafe was intrigued by this secret class. Since mages are fragile in melee combat, necromancers are even weaker than mages physically and rely on offensive classes for protection while casting spells. Since Xiao didn't reveal his talent, Ma Fei assumed it must be something very low rank. Some commented that Xiao was a cool guy because he wasn't bragging about having a secret class. If it were them, they'd already be showing off. The problem is that he can't cast any spells and doubted he'd be able to defend himself during training. The director, however, concluded that once Xiao completed the basics, he'd be able to choose the best universities in the country. After everyone introduced themselves, it was time to go home and rest for training. His friend was happy for him and wished he had been a necromancer too. At least he had 8 points in strength, which wasn't bad, and his talent wasn't so bad either, but hard work should fill in the gaps. Seeing that all of his friend's attributes were only single digits, Xiao realized he was way ahead of the curve. Finally, he arrived home. He always announced his arrival, even though his parents weren't there, as they were missing. In this world, his parents were very kind and loving people. When he was 6, they had to go to the capital. They disappeared afterward, leaving him an orphan. 12 years have passed, and he wished to know what happened to them. What he wanted now was to go to the capital and uncover the truth. The next day, the students were gathered, and the director said he only had one request. If they couldn't handle it, they should return immediately. Failing the training was much better than not living to see another day. In any case, it wasn't common for casualties to occur in this beginner's world, but there were always exceptions. Once, an entire class of 40 students disappeared without a trace. To this day, they don't know what that world was like, only that it was called a nightmare village. If the intention was to scare the students, the goal was more than achieved. But it wasn't supposed to be so terrifying. He said, "As long as they return in time, there's no danger. When the timer reaches 0, they'll be able to enter the portal." Finally, the countdown ended. The beginner's training had begun. Several black lightning bolts formed, and they were now in another world. The students found themselves in what appeared to be an abandoned village. Some looked around in fear, but Ma Fei said he was with them, and that was enough for protection. A pair of suspicious feet observed the students, hidden in the shadows. Confident, Ma Fei asked them to follow him, promising to lead them to the end of the training. With this, he wanted to prove to everyone that he was the strongest, and that even though Xiao had a secret class, he was no match for him. Everything about this place was strange. There hadn't been any sign of the system so far. A figure appeared and said it was truly pitiful because they were all so young. It was almost heartbreaking. Not knowing if it was an NPC or not, Xiao asked the figure what he meant by that. Finally, he greeted them formally. He welcomed them, explaining that they were now in the Nightmare Village, where the seemingly simple challenge had an S-level difficulty. The difficulty was calculated differently. It would be equivalent to an E-level dungeon in normal terms. Their task was to survive and uncover the secret at the center of the village. Knowing the story the director told, they were terrified. Faced with this, some tried to escape, unwilling to stay in such a place. Ma Fei attempted to calm the students, explaining that for an E-level challenge, one must at least be in the initial stage. They were all still disciples. Beyond that came the initial, intermediate, final, king, and divine stages. As soon as one student reached the village exit, a barrier prevented them from leaving. The man explained that once they were inside, they could not leave. It didn't take long for panic to set in, leaving the students completely hopeless. The man's bluntness made Xiao perceive him not as an enemy, but as someone truthful, making it plausible that others may have vanished at this stage. Walking among them, he told them not to worry and encouraged them to get more comfortable. Ma Fei interpreted this as the man motivating them to face the challenges with confidence. In reality, he was suggesting they accept the fact they wouldn't survive past this day. If there weren't heavy pants before, there were certainly more than one now. He introduced himself as Wugam, the village chief, and explained there were 2 rules for living in this place. They could live in any vacant house but must not touch the black stones on the doors. The second rule was to always return home before dark and to lock all doors and windows, never opening them under any circumstances. Xiao asked why they couldn't leave their houses at night. The man responded that the boy would understand once night fell in this place. As night came, everyone decided to follow the man's instructions. They divided into 4 groups of 11 people. Xiao's team entered one of the houses. Finally, the doors closed. One of them suggested resting on the second floor, just to be safe. The healing mage approached him, asking to be protected in case of danger. As a healer, she could provide him with a lot of health points if needed. Another girl accused the healer of being shameless, pointing out how blatantly seductive she was being in front of everyone. Now the two were arguing about trivial matters. The argument continued, and the smaller girl mocked the other, claiming her attributes were only high because she was fat. Through the window, one of the students looked outside. He saw his grandmother, someone he hadn't seen in a long time and dearly missed. She began to say she was cold and would like to come inside, but he needed to open the window. Completely oblivious to the situation, the boy started to open the window. Xiao yelled for him to stop, explaining that it was not his grandmother, but the window was already open. The woman's eyes started to turn red. She immediately lunged at the clueless boy who opened the window. Her jaws resembled those of an animal, and the student was about to become a memory. A spear was conjured inside the house. A sand ability contained the monster. It was Yang, who declared he wouldn't be able to hold the monster for much longer. However, it was enough time for the clueless boy to save his own life. This was a level 3 monster with 25 points in strength and agility, a normal monster but extremely strong by novice standards. Focusing its attention on the mage, the monster attacked. Unable to dodge, the mage joked that if it ate him, he had so much fat it would make the monster sick. The attack was stopped by a magical barrier that appeared. It was conjured by the smaller girl, but as time passed, she began to lose health. She demanded the healer do her job and asked Xiao to summon his undead. Listening to her, both started working as well. The healer prepared her healing magic. She managed to restore her teammates' health as fast as it depleted. If everyone worked together, victory was possible, as long as Xiao performed his summoning spell. But seeing him already on the front lines surprised her. A single strike with the staff was enough to push the monster back. Yang worried, saying that's not how the staff was supposed to be used, and that his friend was putting himself in danger yet again. Xiao struck the monster, taking 50 health points in the process. There was no longer a monster inside the house, and his teammates didn't know what to say about the situation. It was impossible to believe a nightmare was defeated with a single strike, and they wondered if that's how a necromancer was supposed to act. In its place there was a black stone. While the rest of the monster dissipated, the symbol was identical to the one on the door of the house. Xiao imagined there must have been a bug, since he didn't gain any skill points after defeating that monster. His colleague asked if he noticed anything strange, but he said it might just be his imagination. At dawn the next day, Yang thanked his colleagues. If not for them, he didn't know what would have happened. Some commented that Xiao was really strong, and that the other girl, Zhu, provided formidable protection, which Mafei overheard. Even so, he believed that if he had been there, he would have done better. He was confident he could also defeat a nightmare with a single strike. Xiao asked if he was already training in the morning, and his friend said it was expected from the class monitor. Mafei tried to compose himself and said he was just practicing a little, nothing more. He then told Zhu to stay with him, promising not to let her take any damage, but the girl said that was her role. If she didn't take damage, someone else would. He tried to insist he'd fight alone, but she said that was misguided thinking and that they needed to work together and learn from Xiao. Amid their conversation, someone shouted, "Finish everyone! None should escape, and all of them should be thrown into the fire." The village chief ordered them to eliminate anyone who resisted. Mafei said there must be some misunderstanding, but the chief replied that they knew what they did last night. Xiao noticed the numbers on both sides were roughly equal, with no significant age difference. The chief explained that the nightmares protected the village, and by breaking the rules, they were being punished for their sins. They must be punished more than 1,000 times. Mafei asked if there was another way, claiming they destroyed the nightmare accidentally. Indeed there was. The one who angered the nightmares must spend the night outside the shelter. The chief was curious to see if anyone among them had the courage. Not knowing the number or danger lurking outside, staying outside the house was basically asking to become a memory. Xiao quickly stepped forward, saying he was the one who defeated the nightmare and would stay outside. Mafei was worried and tried to fix the situation, thinking Xiao had lost his mind. However, not only was he perfectly lucid, but he also had something he wanted to investigate, something that might help them escape that place. Once they agreed, it was time for him to be tied up. Xiao was chained in the middle of the village. The girl asked what he meant by being able to help and if he knew anything about the village's secret. He might have a good theory, but needed to test it at night. Finally, the moon rose into the sky, illuminating the village streets. The nightmares began to appear. One of them descended from the roof, eerily spotting its target. It leaped from the roof toward the boy. He was expecting to be attacked, so he wasn't surprised. What surprised him was the containment spell that appeared to protect him. His friend told him to act quickly, as he couldn't hold the nightmare for much longer. Mafei stepped in, convinced he could handle the nightmare, and told everyone to calm down. However, reality quickly hit him hard. Fortunately, he managed to defend himself with his sword. The nightmare was too fast, and he had no idea how Xiao had dealt with one as just a mage. Confidently, he thought that if Xiao managed it, he should be able to as well. His attack struck the nightmare, but dealt only 5 points of damage. He wasn't expecting everyone else to be outside, but they came because they thought he would be in trouble alone. The chains were thick, and the girl said only Mafei could break them, but he was busy at the moment. However, that was unnecessary. Xiao broke the chains with his own hands. That abnormal strength made them reconsider whether he was truly a necromancer. Meanwhile, Mafei's harsh reality continued. The girls and Xiao headed toward him to help, and the healer, Zhao, began preparing her healing magic. He refused, saying it was unnecessary, as scars build a warrior. He then told them to aim for the head, as it was the weak spot. Xiao did so, and the nightmare succumbed. It was rather obvious, and he thought he should have figured it out sooner. Xiao said the weak spot wasn't the head, but Mafei thought he was being sabotaged. Now it was time for him to observe his next attack. He believed it was going to be something spectacular to witness. He hoped the nightmare had fallen, but it began to rise from the ground again, making him question if Yang was right about the weak spot. But this was what Xiao did. Maybe he just wasn't as good as the necromancer. This inflated Mafei's ego, as he thought himself far superior to Xiao. They tried calling him back, warning that in his current state, he might end up dead. The nightmare didn't care about him and was ready to attack. Mafei launched a powerful barrage of attacks, yielding 30 points of damage to the monster. Only one more strike was needed to prove he wasn't inferior to Xiao, but then a staff landed the final blow. Mafei was completely outraged. Xiao said he did well, but the monitor was furious that the monster was stolen right in front of him. Enraged, Mafei accused Xiao of taking his item, and with the item in his hands, Xiao realized nothing happened. Before they could recover, 2 nightmares rushed toward them. Xiao told them to get inside the house. There was no point fighting the nightmares, and he had an idea for getting past that place. The students successfully hid, and the nightmares remained outside the house. Now safe, they wanted to know how they would get out of that place. He said they would find out the next day, and when the time was right, they should listen to what he had to say. The next day, the village chief was furious because they destroyed another guardian spirit. No matter what they did, he insisted they must be eliminated for destroying the nightmare village. Xiao asked if they really lived in that place, to which the chief replied that they've lived there for generations. With things as they are, Xiao declared there was only one truth about that village. The chief didn't understand what the boy meant. Pointing at them, Xiao revealed that none of those people were the village's original inhabitants. All of them were, in fact, the class that was wiped out by monsters in the village. They've been trapped there since they entered and cannot leave. The chief said that made no sense and accused Xiao of fabricating stories. However, Xiao had evidence to prove his claim. With one of the stones in hand, the chief said Xiao had committed a grave offense and deserved punishment. Not just him, but every student had a stone in their hands. The chief was horrified because those stones were what protected them, and now they would be punished by God for what they've done. In truth, the stones sustained that world, and if they were destroyed, the village would collapse. Xiao ordered his classmates to destroy the stones. As soon as they were broken, cracks began to appear in the sky. The man's memories started returning, recalling his promise to the director to bring everyone back. They were enthusiastic students who wanted to go to college, but they ended up entering the Nightmare Village. They were all attacked on the same day. He tried to keep his classmates from panicking, but by then they had all been transformed. Now, he was the village leader. Finally, he remembered everything that happened. He was the monitor of his class. A player has uncovered the village's secret, and the rewards will be calculated individually. The player's teleportation is about to begin. The monitor of the other class thanked them all for their efforts. Yang wanted to know how Xiao figured everything out, but Xiao said he'll explain everything once they returned. Time passed, and they wondered why they were still in the village, thinking they had completed the mission. A new mission has appeared for the 5 who destroyed the stones. They must recover the Heart of Nightmares. It's an E-level difficulty mission. Xiao was now level 5 with 101 points in strength. The rest of the students had returned, leaving only Xiao and a few others still there. If this was really the case, they must have received a secret mission, which alone would guarantee them spots in the best universities. However, it was undoubtedly dangerous, and they might not be able to complete it. Except for Xiao, the others were only level 3. Attempting that mission was practically impossible for them to succeed. One of the girls asked if breaking the stones was necessary to reveal the truth. Yang, on the other hand, thought Xiao wanted his classmates to undertake this secret mission with him. Mafei didn't think that was the case, but being competitive, he wanted to complete the mission before Xiao. A nightmare's hand emerged on the rooftop. It didn't take long for several others to appear as well, intent on finishing off the students. They shouted furiously that the students must die. 4 was a formidable number, and Yang didn't think they'd be able to handle them, so they coordinated their abilities to withstand the onslaught. Mafei was the first to attack, dealing 10 damage to one of them. He was still dissatisfied that his attack couldn't finish off a monster in a single strike. The healer said she was almost out of mana, and Zhu was nearly out of health, but Xiao finished the nightmare, gaining 1 attribute point. Zhu warned that 2 more were approaching. The monsters were already very close to him. With a few strikes, he took them down before they hit the ground, earning more attribute points. In front of him, there was a core. As expected for this stage, the rewards were satisfying. It was a restricted item for mages, increasing damage by 5%, so he considered giving it to Yang. Zhu praised their teamwork while Mafei tried to draw attention to himself, but Xiao urged them to keep moving forward. He only needed to take down 1 more to level up, and maybe he'd get some equipment for himself. This excited him greatly. He believed the Heart of the Nightmare must be with one of them, so they should keep defeating them. One of his steps activated a trap. The ground collapsed, swallowing all the students. They fell helplessly into the hole. Xiao managed to land safely. He was unsure where they were, but noticed the ground beneath him was soft. He was on top of Yang, who was still wondering why the ground felt so soft. With everyone accounted for, he checked to see if they were all okay, and they were. The stench was overwhelming, like sewage, and Zhu suggested it might be from the bodies that fell there. But the healer said that wasn't it. The smell came from somewhere else. Then her colleagues saw what she had noticed. Before them stood a massive nightmare, the Nightmare King, with 1,000 health, 65 strength, 20 defense, 60 agility, and skills like Compulsion and Nightmare Realm. It was asleep, and the system warned that waking it would put it into a frenzy. Xiao was nervous about the power of a secret boss. With that strength, Zhu wouldn't be able to block even a single attack, and they hoped the Nightmare's heart wasn't with it. Mafei considered leaving the nightmare asleep, but Xiao said they had a chance. He had a total of 202 attack power, and with his ring, the first strike could take 1/3 of the nightmare's health. He only needed to hit its weak spot 3 or 4 times, but he acknowledged the risk. Yang thought he was delusional for saying they had a chance against a monster like that, but Xiao insisted that if they combined their abilities, they could win, as its defense was low. Hearing this, Mafei realized they needed to distract the monster, and Xiao said that if they did, he'd be able to land clean hits. Xiao also warned that this was risky, since the monster was faster than all of them and strong enough to take them out in a single blow. Even so, they were confident Xiao's strategy would work and agreed to go along with it. Ma Fei cautioned him not to show off, as this boss was incredibly strong. Still, Xiao remained confident and told them to relax. After resting for a bit, it was time to put the plan into action. As long as it wasn't attacked, the nightmare wouldn't wake up, so the first strike had to be precise. On top of the monster, Xiao noticed something that caught his attention. One part of it glowed brightly. Perhaps that was its weak spot. He began preparing his staff to strike. The ring's effect was activated, boosting his attack by 50%. Moreover, the strike was critical, and the boss lost 580 health points in a single hit. His friends watched in disbelief at how much damage the mage dealt. Xiao destroyed the nightmare's heart, and the mission was now changing. They must destroy the nightmare, as the mission was now rank A. The boss rose angrily from its slumber. Everyone should be prepared and act according to the plan. Seeing the players, the nightmare called them evil humans. The nightmare was truly much larger than all of them. It was Ma Fei's turn to attack and draw the monster's attention. Indeed, he was already fully engaged in doing his part of the strategy. His barrage of attacks landed on the boss. He was completely dissatisfied with the difference in power between himself and Xiao and wanted to attack the boss as many times as necessary, but each of his strikes only took 1 point of health away. In response, the nightmare taunted him, saying it would grant his wish to be the first to die. Preparing himself, Ma Fei shouted for it to come at him if it had the courage. It was time for Yang and Zhu to take their positions. Both the sand containment and the shield were conjured. The boss's attack seemed to have been blocked. Even so, Ma Fei took damage, and the healer couldn't keep up. She couldn't hold on much longer. Xiao needed to act, or Ma Fei would be flattened. Xiao was already on his way to perform his part of the plan. The nightmare was struck again, taking 182 points of damage. With its health running low, it activated its Nightmare Realm ability. Xiao was surprised and waited to see what would happen. The nightmare roared, and its shadows expanded. This caused it to deal area damage, and his friends couldn't defend themselves. This couldn't be allowed to happen. Xiao was certain the other class got stuck there because of this attack. Hoping to end the spell, he struck again, dealing the same amount of damage. Only one more attack was needed to finish off the boss. Xiao advanced toward it to end everything. The healer urged him to be cautious, warning that she had no mana left. Knowing this, he prepared his final attack. He managed to deal the last bit of damage needed to defeat the boss. For the first time, that boss was defeated, earning him 30 ability points and an additional 10 points from his talent. By leveling up, he gained another 10 points. The mission was finally complete, and the rewards would be distributed individually. His teammates could hardly believe they had managed to deal with the situation. The healer received a rank D talent, and Zhu received a rank C talent. Yang earned a rank E talent, and Ma Fei got a rank D talent as well. Xiao was the top performer, receiving a rank B magic book and 50 experience points. Although he couldn't use it immediately, the nightmare's soul might still yield something interesting. From it emerged a rank B sword, which increased attack by 100 points, ignored 30% of defense, and boosted sword damage by 20%. For Xiao, this was bad luck. He didn't want a rank B sword since he couldn't use it. He gave it to Ma Fei, who hadn't expected such generosity. Ma Fei pointed out that the item could be sold for enough money to buy a house in the capital, but Xiao didn't care about that and checked to see if there were any other items. Looking at his status window, he realized his strength was astounding, but his health was still low, making him very fragile. The restriction of his talent prevented other stats from increasing, so he needed to find a way to overcome this issue. He knew he had to become more resilient and cautious. Finally, the students were ready to be transported back. The 5 of them returned to where they had been before. Their sudden appearance caused an uproar among the students in the gymnasium. The director informed them that they had been missing for 2 days and wanted to know what happened, since he hadn't expected them to return. Hearing everything, he remarked that they were very fortunate and that this experience would open many doors for them. The others were thrilled that their class had so many geniuses. Even so, Ma Fei remained competitive, convinced he could surpass Xiao with the item he had received. He just needed to level up a bit. A man rushed in, informing the director that representatives from 2 prestigious universities were there and that they were specifically looking for those 5 students. The director hadn't even reported the incident yet, but the university representatives were already aware of it, so the director welcomed them into the gymnasium. The 2 were Professors Ping and Pei. Looking at the students, Pei congratulated them for completing the secret mission. He announced that Jingdu University would like to have them and offered to write recommendation letters immediately if they wished. The other professor argued that he shouldn't do that without conducting a proper test, and the 2 began to argue. Professor Ping was from Hokkien University and told them not to worry. The test only served to see how they behaved in certain situations and whether they were adaptable. As a necromancer, Xiao couldn't show the abilities of his class, but he wanted to go to Jingdu to learn more about his parents. The professor then asked who would like to be tested first. Mafei volunteered, saying he was a level 5 swordsman with a B-rank talent. Being at level 5 after only completing beginner training was impressive. Professor Pei praised the boy and asked him to try and hit him, noting that he was a level 25 marksman. The student advanced, asking the professor to be careful. He delivered his strike, which hit the magical barrier directly. The tip of the sword pierced the defense, to the professor's surprise. He complimented the boy's technique, and Mafei thanked him for the praise. They estimated that his strength must be at 35 and his agility also quite high. These comments drove the students wild, as they were deeply impressed. Faced with such talent, the professors realized they would have to compete for him. Both asked if he had chosen which university he wanted to attend, as they were eager to accept him. However, Mafei wanted to see the others tested first, though in truth he wanted to go wherever Xiao went. Next up was the healer, who stepped forward. She used her healing magic in front of them. With it, she could heal her entire team, even though she was only level 4. The paladin's shield was also quite durable. Even at level 4, she could reflect part of the damage. Her talent allowed her to return 20% of the absorbed damage. For someone tasked with defense, such a talent was incredibly useful. Pei assumed Yang was also a paladin, but in reality, he was a mage. A big guy like him being a mage was as if his class were swapped with the paladins. His test began, and the boy got ready. Seeing this, the professor had no idea what Yang was doing, as he didn't sense any magic. After a few moments, Yang used his skill to make the ground explode. A large explosion occurred in the middle of the gym. The professor couldn't sense the ability, and even at level 25, he lost 3 health points, something dangerous for someone at his level. They would need to keep an eye on the principal, as 5 prodigies emerged from this class. Perhaps Yang was one too. Finally, it was Xiao's turn. He was a level 7 necromancer, and his talent classification was unknown. He was 2 levels above the others, but the professor assumed his talent must be low. They would conduct the test first and discuss his talent afterward. He waited to see the undead Xiao could summon, but definitely didn't want to be injured by another beginner. Seeing Xiao approach, the professor didn't expect the necromancer to act this way, as it didn't align with his class. It might be inexperience. Only then did the professor realize a right hook was heading for his face. Curious to see how strong a mage could be, he decided to let the punch land. The strike was strong enough to hurt him. Not only that, but he was thrown across the floor. There was not a single person in the gym who wasn't shocked by this outcome. The principal, like them, was equally incredulous. A beginner student managed to knock down a level 25 professor with a single blow. The other professor believed Pei went easy on the student, as necromancers aren't physically strong. There must be something wrong with Xiao, who nearly knocked him out with one punch. Among the students, the discussion grew about how a necromancer shouldn't have such strength. Professor Ping was grateful he wasn't the one to take the rookie hit, or he'd be spitting teeth. Xiao asked if the test was over, and it was, but they couldn't complete his evaluation without seeing him summon undead. He then said he wanted to excel in physical combat like a warrior, but his ultimate goal was to go to Jingdu. This hadn't happened before, someone specializing in a class other than their own. So, Pong decided to talk to the principal first. On the phone, he told the principal that the rookie was terrifying and wanted to train as a warrior even though he was a necromancer. Despite being level 7, he threw a level 25 professor into the air. Now, the principal wanted all 5 students at any cost. Thinking he might lose him, Ping wanted to invite Xiao personally and requested a video call. Jing Yang introduced himself as the director of Jingdu University and expressed his hopes that Xiao would join them. But before he could finish his presentation, Xiao announced he would join the university. Ping listened in dismay, having lost the greatest talent, and hoped to at least recruit one of the others. The director suggested that since they were from the same class, they could all go together, and the group agreed, much to Pei's despair. Ping was overjoyed. This was undoubtedly the highlight of his career. However, Xiao had some additional questions for the director and wanted to know if he had heard of his father, Xiao Anqing. The director was surprised to learn that Xiao was Anqing and Bishi's son, which explained why he looked familiar. The boy wanted to know if the director knew where his parents were. The director explained that they had been his students more than a decade ago and were extraordinary individuals. He knew they had disappeared but hadn't heard from them since their graduation. They had spoken of a secret world, and the director advised Xiao to go there, as there might be something waiting for him. The director promised to send the admission letters soon and advised them to pass through the worlds related to their classes to avoid unnecessary scrutiny. With that, he wished them good luck and bid them farewell. A week passed, and the students were preparing for their next test. Today, they would enter a world specifically designed for mages. To succeed, they would need to work together, as their mental abilities would be tested. Now, it was time to reveal the criteria for passing. Before a portal, blue flames rose. Xiao asked Yang if he was ready, and Yang replied that practice was better than theory, but the more people involved, the more dangerous it became. He suggested that Xiao accompany him. They could attempt this challenge multiple times, although the rewards would be cumulative. Yang seemed excited about what lay ahead. The guide greeted them, announcing that a 2-player world was being prepared. The world selected for them was the Cave of 10,000 Poisons. Before the guide could explain the rules, Xiao rushed ahead, leaving Yang surprised. No instructions were provided, and Yang pointed out that they hadn't been asked how Xiao managed to clear the skeleton cave. Yang assumed that if Xiao fought his way through the skeletons, he must be a fool. In that place, there was an evil tribe capable of poisoning people without them realizing it. The poisonous worms would eat their victims from the inside out until nothing remained. Their task was to locate the tribe and destroy the worms. Rewards would be determined based on how they completed the challenge. The mission required 5 players, so the system paired them with 3 others. One of them warned the pair not to slow them down, but a girl scolded him, insisting he be more polite. She introduced herself as Fang Yuan, a fire mage. Her younger brother, Fang Sun, was also a fire mage, and the third member was Long Chang. Yang introduced himself, and so did Xiao, expressing hope that they could work together to succeed. At the entrance, there appeared to be instructions, but the rude one just wanted to destroy the door and move forward. However, his attack had no effect. The door seemed immune to magic, and inscribed on it were the words, "Morality and integrity promote peace." If it was immune to magic, perhaps it wasn't immune to brute force. The girl appeared to have solved the riddle, but with a single punch, Xiao made the door disappear. The rude one looked foolish, and the girl was incredulous. She had solved the riddle, but the door was already open. Xiao explained he just wanted to test if physical strength could break it. He hadn't expected it to be so fragile. In the next room, there was another door surrounded by various flowers. The flowers didn't seem normal, and the group was urged to be cautious, but Yang had already gotten entangled. Now everyone was poisoned, losing 3 health points per minute. They needed to leave quickly, or they wouldn't survive. With his low health, Xiao wouldn't last even half an hour in that condition. The words on the door seemed meaningless, so they rushed toward it. There was no time for another riddle. They needed to act immediately. Once again, Xiao struck the door that blocked their path. Without an answer, brute force had to suffice. Thanks to this, they escaped the room. Although the place was meant to test their mental abilities, they felt they hadn't yet needed to use their brains. Now they had completed the first part of the task. A child greeted them, introducing herself as Xiang. She asked if they came from outside, then she noticed they were all poisoned and explained that the poison came from the bean flower. They needed to follow her to the cave if they wanted the antidote, because if the poison spread too much, there would be nothing they could do. Unsure of what else to do, they decided to follow her. At her village, the girl introduced them to her parents, explaining who she had brought with her. The parents asked who they were, and the child replied that they were outsiders and poisoned. Hearing this, they were invited into the house to be treated for the poison. It didn't take long for her to bring out the 5-venom soup for them to drink. The appearance of the soup was anything but appealing. At first, none of them had the courage to try it, but Xiao couldn't afford to hesitate, as he had only half his health left, so he downed the soup in one go. Afterward, he declared it was actually quite good, and that he was no longer poisoned, encouraging his companions to do the same. He then asked the child about the tribe. She didn't know much, but the patriarch told them to avoid the outside world and not use their magic unnecessarily. Now that they were cured, her mother asked them to leave, since they weren't accustomed to hosting outsiders. However, the child protested, saying they shouldn't leave because they rarely had visitors. She told them not to listen to her mother, and that they could stay as long as they wanted. With that, Xiao agreed to stay, as everyone had low health, though he found the family's behavior strange. The child then bid them good night, leaving them to rest in the house. She personally escorted her parents outside. That night, the full moon would rise, and soon it would begin. The villagers gathered in one place. They were performing a sacrifice to the insects to ensure good harvests and protection from illness. At the altar, the priestess dripped a single drop of what looked like tomato juice. A massive swarm of insects emerged from the area. They began attacking the people tied up as sacrifices. In no time, nothing remained of them but skeletons. The players saw this and were horrified. They realized they needed to escape quickly. Xiao was strong but lacked area of effect attacks. At the ritual, the priestess noticed they were being watched. She ordered someone to deal with the intruders, but to bring them back alive. Back at the cabin, they tried to figure out what to do in this situation. If the villagers found out they were there to eliminate the insects, they would be attacked immediately. While they talked, Xiao heard a noise and asked what it could be. Insects had entered the cabin and were everywhere. To protect themselves, the fire mage used one of her techniques. Xiao joined in the attack, but the enemies were too weak for him to gain any points. He realized that if he could, it would be too good to be true. Inside the cabin, Yang used his sand technique. Seeing this, Xiao praised him for combining 2 talents, but it drained almost all of Yang's mana. A warrior from the tribe approached, remarking on how tough they were. Because of what they've done, he said, they will become food for the insects they revere. While he spoke, Yang used the same technique, but it only took 11 health points from the warrior. It was almost useless, as the warrior was level 10 with 40 strength and 20 defense. NPC stats remained hidden until they took damage. Seeing this, they doubted they could overcome him, as he was as strong as a boss. But Xiao didn't care and wondered if this world operated differently from others. As the imminent attack approached, the warrior didn't think he'd take any significant damage. Yet, with a single punch, he lost 121 health points, enough to put him on alert. Angered at being hurt by a mere human, he used his insect bite ability. Now he was much stronger and had significantly better defense. He imagined that no one could hurt him in this form. Still, Xiao wasn't the least bit impressed. After a brief session of slaps to the face, the warrior was humbly prostrated with only 23 health points left. Now it was time for him to spill the beans about the sacrifice and who the priestess was. He explained that it was a pact with the insects to perform sacrifices every full moon, and that their queen resided in a green stone. That's why they were healed, to become the next sacrifices. Xiao now wanted to know why the girl called the place by a different name, but the man claimed he didn't know who she was. There was only one person with the name Dong there, and she was their matriarch. Thanking him for his cooperation, Xiao let the man go on his way. Changing his mind, Xiao decided to finish him off and collect a skill point. With that, he leveled up and earned an item, the Sage's Protection, which could prevent a fatal blow once. An S-rank item was invaluable in any situation. Now, the group discussed their next move. The villagers would soon discover the man was dead, and dealing with the matriarch wouldn't be easy. The mission required them to eliminate the insects, so they didn't have to confront the villagers directly. Therefore, their best chance was to act before the matriarch realized what had happened. Walking along, they found the path clear and proceeded. On the ground, they saw the bodies of the child's supposed parents, realizing they were their own. That explained their strange behavior. Not everyone there was evil. Combining their attacks, they attempted to destroy the stone where the queen resided. The combination resulted in an explosion. Before them, a massive crater was revealed. That should have been enough to end the insects, but the mission continued. Behind them, a woman spoke, commenting on how unruly they had been. If they were there, it must mean her warrior was no longer alive. If this was the matriarch, Xiao wanted to know if she was Xiaong. She asked if he disliked her current form and wondered if she should transform into a child again. As a child once more, she asked which form he preferred. Her plan was to make him her companion, but since he had killed so many insects, there was nothing she could do now. Xiao demanded to know why she treated members of her own tribe that way. They were her parents. To her, they were merely two useless, disobedient individuals. Unfortunately, Xiao was an orphan, and this deeply angered him. Noticing his anger, she told him not to be upset. He would be reunited with them soon enough. Suddenly, a swarm of insects appeared, ready to attack. The voracious cloud headed straight for Xiao. The fire mage said they needed to help him and began casting her magic, but before they could act, the warrior from earlier attacked them. He declared they shouldn't interfere with the matriarch and should face him instead. He was level 10 with 50 points in strength and 30 in defense and agility. The insects were numerous, and Xiao was taking steady damage. If his agility and defense matched his strength, this would be much easier. He considered using his brave heart talent now, but decided to keep fighting since he could survive a fatal blow. As he got closer, the matriarch assumed he was eager to become insect food. However, she didn't anticipate what happened next. With a single strike, Xiao left a gaping hole in her body, but it wasn't fatal. She had 30 points in strength, 20 in defense, 50 in agility, and was level 10. She was also a rare NPC. Her stats were low, so there must be another reason she was rare. While lamenting the damage she had taken, her agility increased by 8 points. Xiao braced himself for her next move. Her strike was devastating. Before he realized it, her hand had already pierced his chest. Her agility surged suddenly, leaving him with just 9 health points. Once he died, she planned to use his skin as a souvenir. Yang was worried about his friend's condition, as Xiao was in serious trouble. While Yang was distracted, the warrior took the opportunity to launch a potentially fatal attack. This reinforced the idea that they shouldn't ignore him. Yang cast his magic again, to which the warrior scoffed, claiming he took no damage from fat people. He said those attacks only tickled. Surprisingly, the sand turned red. It exploded, dealing 312 points of damage to the warrior. Now the warrior was much slimmer, having used a fat-burning ability. Free of his enemy, Yang rushed to assist Xiao, who was more concerned about the fact that his friend was now a skinny guy. Even Yang didn't fully understand it. He just got angry, lost weight, and now had almost 300 points in spirit. This was extremely high and interfered with how he used his talents. Knowing this, he grabbed the matriarch and asked his friend to use that technique one more time. However, doing so would likely cause him to perish in the process. He told his friend to trust him and to act rather than talk. Trusting him, his friend began preparing the technique. The matriarch begged him to let her go, not wanting to meet her end there. A powerful explosion engulfed them both. His companions were anxious about what might have happened. The item saved him, and with the courage of his act, he gained a new talent. Strong Contract, ranked A. Each point of strength now added 10 health points, effectively solving his low health problem. Yang approached, worried and curious, as his friend was supposed to have died but was revived. As they talked, they realized the matriarch hadn't dropped any items, meaning she was likely still alive. Amid the smoke, she reappeared, saying the two of them were truly troublesome. Now was the time for them to witness her true beauty. Her hybrid form was level 15 with 130 strength, 80 defense, and 100 agility. Xiao asked his friend to use the magic again, but his spirit had dropped to just 48 points. A system warning announced that the boss had just become stronger than anticipated and advised them to leave immediately due to the risk. Yang wanted to flee, but Xiao hadn't considered it for even a moment. Once again, the system warned them to escape and restart the custom world, but Xiao reminded Yang that the director had tasked them with completing it, and that's exactly what they would do today. The matriarch liked this decision, confident she could finish them off quickly. The two clashed fiercely, both losing health in the process. Exchanging blows, the matriarch took more damage than she dealt. Now she questioned what Xiao was made of. He shouldn't still be alive. Even at level 8, he was stronger than expected, almost as if he were the boss of this place. A mage wasn't supposed to have this kind of strength. Amid the fight, she asked him to pause and demanded to know if Baiji had sent him. It could only be him, she said, as Baiji was her creator, but Xiao had no idea who that was. Using his staff, he struck again, dealing 213 damage. The name Baiji seemed to strike a nerve with her. She muttered that it couldn't be possible, that he couldn't have that name or have defeated her. With his victory, Xiao earned 15 skill points and 75 experience points, leveling up once again. The stage was finally completed, and the rewards were being calculated based on performance. Fang Yuan received an E rank, Long an F, Yang an A, and Xiao an S. After receiving the rewards, Xiao was now level 10 and nearly at the initial stage, strong enough to enter dungeons alone. He received a B-ranked item usable at level 11, which increased health by 800 points. Additionally, he obtained a mysterious magic cube with some kind of sealed power inside. The cube formed a connection with Xiao, allowing him to use abilities from others as long as they weren't more than 10 levels higher than him. However, it still had one sealed ability. This item was already excellent, so the sealed ability must be even better. A portal appeared, and the guide congratulated them for completing the Cave of 10,000 Poisons. As an additional reward, she increased their spirit by 20%. It was a great reward, though 20% of 0 is still 0. The others thanked Xiao, as it was thanks to him that they were alive. When asked which university he would attend, he replied, Jingdu. Hearing this, they decided to go there as well. The guide seemed pleased with their progress. At level 10, Xiao's strength was 202, and his total health was 4,040, thanks to his items. This didn't include the cumulative skills he had gained. Back at the school, they were welcomed by their peers. Mafei couldn't believe Xiao was already level 10. After all, in the mage world, there were fewer monsters, making steady progress more difficult. The girls, on the other hand, couldn't believe the other boy was Yang, as he looked entirely different. However, Yang was eager to regain his weight, as he didn't feel safe looking so slim in the other world. Since they already had their spot secured, someone asked if they still needed to take an exam. Besides, the exam day was important, gathering the best students, and the winner would also receive an A-ranked item. Mafei said he would participate and take first place. Among the warriors, he heard from his father that this year's first-place winner would receive an S-level item. Knowing the prize was good, Xiao decided to win the competition. Spying on him were some people who assumed he was weak because he was at level 10. They descended toward him to capture him. Standing before him, they blocked his path. Not knowing who they were or why they were there, he asked if he could help them. They wanted to know if he was Xiao, the one who defeated the matriarch in the Cave of 10,000 Poisons. Both were assassins, but weaker than him. They might be related to Baiji, as she had mentioned before. Now he regretted not interrogating her further. He then said his name was Mafei, and claimed they had the wrong person, prompting one of them to apologize for the inconvenience. However, the other called him foolish for believing that. It was time to take him back, just in case he was a mage. In the blink of an eye, the two vanished. Even so, Xiao showed no reaction of surprise. The two attacked him simultaneously. He didn't even bother to dodge, clearly lying about his identity. Before they could complete their thought, Xiao was already prepared to attack the first one. With one strike, he took away 197 health points from the unsuspecting attacker. The other realized his enemy was strong, as even he couldn't do that to his companion. Indeed, this man was no mage. Looking at the remaining fool, Xiao asked if he was ready for round 2. The man began apologizing to Mafai, explaining he mistook him for someone else. He admitted he was just a weak cog in an organization ranking below 7,000, and hoped the matter could end there. A level 18 assassin ranking among the 7,000 strongest in their organization highlighted its power. He needed to let them go, or their retaliation would be worse. Continuing his path, Xiao said he hoped they found who they were looking for and offered to help, which they declined. Baiji was a divine white beast with horns, worshipped for exorcising demons from the land. Searching the internet, he found no information about this organization. Soon his identity would be exposed, and with his current strength, he couldn't defend himself properly. He needed to take the exam for his safety and head to Jingdu, as the director there was the most powerful swordsman in the land, which would make him feel safer. If the university wasn't safe, then no other place would be. Now he focused his attention on the magic cube and what it could do. Perhaps it was an item that connected different worlds, which was why it was given to him. It raised more questions than answers, and Xiao thought about his parents. The apparent leader of this organization stood atop a building. They reported that their information was wrong and that the person they found was indeed very strong. That result was useless to her. For now, they would ignore the matriarch's death, as there were more important matters to attend to in the city. Days later, Xiao was with the university director, seeking to know if he knew anything about the cube. He explained it was found in a specialized world and appeared sealed, but he wanted to know if it could be opened somehow. The director said it could be opened with a password, but without it, they could use the key of all locks. This item could break the seal without damaging the cube's contents, as the seal wasn't very strong. Hearing this, Xiao asked where he could find this item. He could find it in the Machine Kingdom, but was warned that it was an open-world realm, and he must be cautious of other players. In that realm, there was a war between humans and machines, as the machines had developed consciousness. In the end, they signed a peace treaty, and the area where he was located was human territory. To obtain the item, he needed a mission designated by Hu Jun, lord of those lands. The only question was how to find him. Beside him, an old man passed by, lost in thought about solving a mathematical problem. Distracted, the old man bumped into someone larger than him. Trying to get up from the ground, he apologized for the incident. The young man mocked the old man, saying he must do this on purpose or be incapable of walking properly. Claiming he was hurt in the collision, he demanded compensation. Harassing the old man, he insisted on being paid for the bump. Intervening, Xiao told the young man he was brave to extort an old man in broad daylight. Defiantly, the young man told Xiao to stay out of it unless he planned to help the old man pay. But evil cannot escape the law. His punch was already inevitably close to hitting him. Thus, the clown was thrown far away. The remaining companion was paralyzed with fear. Terrified, he apologized and said that he and the other one would leave the two alone, and hoped there would be no retaliation. Without lingering, both fled scared. While the old man recovered, Xiao asked if he was okay. He said he didn't have much money. However, Xiao declined, saying it wasn't in his nature to accept such things, and the old man thanked him, regretting not being able to pay for what he did. He continued, saying he didn't need anything but would like to know how to find the lord of those lands because he needed an item called the key to all locks, and he had heard he could get it from him. The young man's luck was great because the old man could help him with that. He also warned that it wouldn't be easy to obtain items from him, but Xiao said he had just used a little over 1% of what he could do and was confident he would succeed. Elsewhere, the clowns talked about whether the lord of the lands had found what he was looking for. He couldn't say, but that player was the strongest he had ever encountered. A young woman said that Xiao was still giving lectures and, no matter what, he should be brought to her. The man said he would do so for Lady Monde. After walking for some time, the old man said, "The lord of the lands lived inside that enormous house, and Xiao thanked him. It was an impressive mansion, and he wanted to know how that old man wandered through it freely. Turning to ask, he realized the old man had disappeared. Anyway, he would continue searching for him to obtain the item. Opening the doors, he was met with a grand hall. In what would be the throne sat the old man, and beside him were the ones who had troubled him. Now he introduced himself as the Lord of the City of Machines, and those two were his strongest guards in the entire city. However, he had staged that scene because he needed to find someone stronger than his guards. At the moment, that person was him, Shao. As long as he helped, he would gladly give the key to all locks. At that moment, a secret mission began. He would present a seminar tomorrow about his research, and the robots that wanted to steal it wouldn't miss the opportunity. Shao thought he wanted protection, but the old man said no. He wanted him to defeat the robots. The mission was to destroy the robot queen and her heart. Since they were just robots, he accepted the mission. The next day, the old man was presenting his seminar. With technological advancement, man is better understanding the mysteries of nature. It is still unknown how much of life could be digitized, but artificial intelligence is heading in that direction, and there is also the obstacle of reproduction. His question was whether a robot could develop, could grow. During the lecture, Shao didn't understand anything and just waited for the robots to show up. Above, a glass panel began to crack. Through the opening created, a robot descended from the air. It said metal was better than flesh and bones, and that the professor should embrace this truth. As soon as the robot arrived, security was called. One of the guards said that this wasn't a place for him, and his name was Scram. There was no response. Instead, the robot disappeared, reappearing only to strike him in the stomach. The others who were there to contain him watched helplessly. Thus, it didn't take long for him to handle the rest of the guards. Meanwhile, Shao observed everything and said it was a very disrespectful sight. The old man said they were there for him and that this time he would go to the kingdom of machines. But with that, he bet everything he had on Shao. Scram subdued everyone, claiming his body was better because it wasn't biological. Through the same hole above, another figure began to descend. It was the Queen of Machines, and she ordered the professor to return with her. He agreed on the condition that she ordered the robots to stop. Binding him with chains, she said that if he had been obedient before, it wouldn't have come to this. The robot told the men to leave immediately, as he would stay to have some more fun. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared with the professor. With them out of the scene, Shao addressed the robot that had stayed behind and said he had heard him claim to have the strongest physique. Scram said that humans cannot understand the beauty of mechanical transformation, so Shao decided to attack him first. In response, Scram invited the young man to join the mechanical revolution and acquire an enhanced body. The first strike landed, costing Scram 306 health points. His stats were formidable, but they posed no challenge to Shao. Realizing the situation, Scram was now heavily injured. Shao thanked him for the invitation, but said he didn't need it. Scram still couldn't believe a human managed to punch through his body. He wanted to know how it was possible, and Xiao replied that he simply clenched his fists and struck. In truth, however, Xiao possessed the ancient sacred body of the human race. Continuing, Xiao immobilized the robot with one foot, pinning him to the ground. With another strike, Xiao demanded that Scram take him to the machine kingdom if he didn't want to become scrap metal. After this brief exchange, Scram began leading Xiao to the Queen's location. Scram assumed the professor allowed himself to be captured to guide Xiao to the heart's location. The robot was terrified of the young man's strength and didn't understand why the Queen let him in. With more questions than answers, they continued their journey. In the machine kingdom, the Queen had the professor in custody. She apologized to him for bringing him there in such a rough manner. The professor responded that he would not betray humanity to join her cause. However, the Queen urged him to stop being stubborn and look around. In front of them, something was being built and perfected. That was undoubtedly the heart he spoke of. It was both human and machine, a hybrid between the two, defying the term robot. The Queen preferred to call the process ascension, as the flesh is weak and the machine is strong. It was time for the professor to join the glorious evolution, but he called her a traitor for abandoning her humanity to serve the machine's purposes. Hearing this, she asked what he just said. Several people began falling from above as she asked the professor to observe. They screamed for help as they were torn apart. Mechanical arms emerged from the robot, cutting through the people. Their bodies were absorbed by the hybrid heart. Meanwhile, in the machine city, Xiao had already landed and was facing several robots. They saw him as an intruder. Fighting them, Xiao found them weak but strong enough to earn attribute points. He hadn't expected this and was quite pleased with the result. Eventually, there were no more functioning robots before him. The professor, witnessing the atrocity, declared that the queen was truly a monster. However, the queen retorted that his anger would solve nothing. She explained that the heart was called Marta and was actually a failure. They had intended for the robot to grow organically. Instead, they inadvertently created a monster that consumed flesh with an ever-growing appetite. It started with one person, and now they didn't know its limit. She offered the professor a choice. He could try to solve the problem or ignore it, knowing they would continue feeding it with people. There was only one person he could count on, and that was Xiao. A robot approached and reported that a human with the ancestral sacred body had invaded the area. Hearing this, the queen asked if it was the same person her subordinate mentioned in a message. Before he could respond, a piece of metal flew into the room. Xiao had just arrived. Finally, the person everything depended on had arrived. The queen wanted to confirm if this was the person with the ancestral body. She congratulated Xiao for entering her kingdom, noting that the warrior he defeated was one of the strongest there. She hadn't expected him to be defeated by a human. Manga was a rare level NPC, level 15 with excellent attributes. Looking at her, Xiao asked if it was embarrassing to be defeated by a human with the ancestral sacred body and whether she wanted to avenge him. Without answering, her guards advanced to attack him. This was great for Xiao, since he could earn more free points easily. A single blow was enough to take down the first guard. With the same ease, the second guard was also destroyed. This mortal body was far stronger than those altered by the queen. Seeing this, the queen considered that the ancestral body might indeed be real and thought he would be incredibly powerful if modified by her. He would undoubtedly be the strongest warrior in the world. Meanwhile, Xiao asked the professor if he was all right. Already standing, he ordered the boy to look in a specific direction. It was the mechanical heart, level 15 and without attributes, but it seemed to be undergoing a metamorphosis. He also said they were using people to feed the machine. Seeing that, he would destroy the machine even if the professor hadn't asked. At the moment, the queen only thought they needed to defeat the one with the sacred ancestral body. Then she said he should abandon his weak body and join the evolution. There was no reaction from him, and she was trying to figure out what he would do. Faster than she could notice, he had already passed her. It didn't take much longer for him to stand before the heart, ready to destroy it. Now the queen was desperate, begging him to stop and not do anything to Marta. Her cries were in vain, as the first blow hit the heart squarely. Realizing what could happen, she rushed toward them to stop Xiao from completing his mission. Seeing her approach, he prepared to react. He told her not to interfere. About to be struck, all of her systems warned her to move away from him immediately, as the risk was immense. Even so, she was hit, losing 288 health points. The impact was so strong that she broke through what was behind her. Although it was a powerful blow, the queen still had plenty of health remaining. An impressive force. She absolutely had to have this person on her side in the machine kingdom. Without further distractions, Xiao turned his attention back to the heart. Once again, he punched it without resistance. Angry at what she did to the people, he only wished for it to break quickly. After successive strikes, the heart exploded into several pieces. As a result, he gained 3 attribute points and 100 experience points. The room was now covered in a tomato-like liquid spread everywhere from the heart's destruction. This made the queen furious, as Marta represented hope for the robots. But the only thing on his mind was the number of human lives lost. She was clearly a human who believed she was a robot, and she was an excellent liar. Despite everything, what the queen desired was to talk to Xiao. Even though he was strong, his strength was still insignificant. The true queen would forgive him for everything as long as he joined her. With that, he had a chance to redeem himself and atone for his sins. Xiao believed that Manga was the leader of the machines and the queen. Nearby, the professor told the boy not to be deceived, but he had no interest in this mechanical evolution and was quite fond of his body. Looking at him, Mande was certain that this would change when he met the queen. It was Xiao's desire to meet her, so Mande guided him through the place. Through metal corridors, they continued walking. Mande pointed them in the right direction. Opening one of his hands, he released a small robot. It flew discreetly and positioned itself at the back of Xiao's neck. This tiny robot could infect people, turning them into machines. The robot mosquito was in position. Mande was confident that this would work and that the queen would reward him for the feat. In position, the robot prepared its small drill, but at the slightest discomfort, Xiao struck the robot. As soon as he did, he realized Mande's scheme and turned to attack him. Mande feigned ignorance. Before he could say anything, he had already been struck. The blow was strong, but he did his best to stay on his feet. Xiao was contemplating the strength of the level 15 NPC. They were not so easy to handle. Mande was furious and insisted on asking if he didn't want to meet the robot queen. Since he was attacked, he retaliated. And if he was correct, the queen must be nearby. If that's the case, Mande no longer needed to guide him. Given that, he accepted the fight and said he'd take him to the queen, even if it was just his remains. After all, the queen would make a new body for him anyway. Mande's robotic fist headed toward Xiao, but Xiao also landed a punch. It was useless. Mande's attacks were completely ineffective. He became increasingly intrigued by the strength of the sacred ancestral body. Grabbing one of Mande's arms, he said, "Scrap doesn't need to eat," striking him once more, causing him to lose even more health. Mande was cornered, unable to move. Meanwhile, Xiao prepared another headbutt. It hit Mande so hard that his face began to crack. The force of the impact sent him flying into the nearest wall, destroying it. What remained afterward was his robotic form with almost no health left. He admitted to underestimating the human, but now he would show Xiao what he should have done from the start. That appearance didn't appeal to Xiao, who would prefer a peaceful death over becoming something like that. The machine attempted one final strike against the young man. Not intending to take the blow for free, Xiao also prepared a punch to hit the robot. The clash between the two resulted in a critical hit. As a result, Xiao leveled up and gained a total of 25 attribute points. He had finally entered the initial stage. It was about time he reached that level. With this, he completed the mission and obtained the key to all locks. Even so, he wanted to find the queen, hoping she might have some interesting item. To access the next pavilion, a password was required. He tried a few times without success. If he had known this, Mande would still be alive. Now he had to find someone who knew the code. On the other side, the queen was waiting for him. Knowing how this had gone before, she wanted to understand why he was coming to her even after completing the mission. The door shattered into several pieces. When in doubt, violence is never the question, but it's always the answer. On the throne sat what appeared to be a human girl. Addressing her, he asked what she was doing in that place. She quickly realized this human was different, a little odd. Faced with her silence, he asked if she could speak and whether she had a name. Finally, she said she was the queen of the Machine Kingdom. This caught him off guard. An epic-level NPC with unknown attributes and only 100,000 health. If he thought he was strong, that notion ended right then. With all that health, she could go to an A-rank world and take over the place. Aware of the risk, he apologized and said this poor and humble servant had taken a wrong turn and was already leaving. As soon as he turned his back, chains emerged from her body. Now he was trapped and could do little about it. The queen pulled him closer to herself. She was so strong that he couldn't move, but the queen told him not to fear, as she wouldn't harm him. Touching his head, she appeared to absorb his memories. Through this, she glimpsed what the outside world looked like. She already knew that the world she lived in wasn't real. It was just one virtual world among many others, soon to reset, and everything would return to how it was before. However, if it was a flaw, as long as she stayed in this room, she would remain the same. And she couldn't even recall how many times this had happened. After so much time, he was the first to come to her, and she wouldn't waste this chance. The young man asked if she had read his memories, but she said it was an exchange. It wasn't surprising that she had such a high level. Hearing this, he asked if the queen wanted to leave, and she said yes, but she could destroy him, as he was just an 11th level human who couldn't defy the rules of that world. However, she explained it wasn't necessary to break the rules. With her hand, she struck his chest. The gesture surprised Xiao, who didn't know what she was doing. Removing an object from within him, she said they could use the rules of the other world he spoke of. This was the queen's true heart, an S-rank item with a life of its own. It was meant for him to take, as it would soon grow and become a version of her. Players could collect items. Through this, she could discover what the outside world was like. Xiao asked if she was worried about what he might do once outside, but in his memories, she hadn't seen a single moment where he broke a promise. Besides, she wanted to know what life outside was like. This was an NPC with consciousness who wished to experience the real world. The queen asked if he had made his decision, and the young man said he had no choice. Hearing this, she thanked him and allowed him to leave. Upon completing the mission, the system rated him as A rank. He earned a B rank magic book, a C rank item, as well as experience and 5 attribute points. The mechanical knuckle increased the critical chance by 30%. That's not bad at all for someone like him who uses fists. Now, it was time to take the cube to the director. Finally, he was teleported outside. In the director's office, he called for him and found it strange that no one was there. Either way, since he already had the key, he'd try to open the cube himself. The key was placed into the seal binding the cube. Lightning burst from the object along with a bluish light, and it began to move. From it emerged a blade with unknown attributes, an evolved item. That's what they left for him, but he didn't know why it was a weapon or why it appeared to lack attributes. It wasn't very suitable since he was a mage. The director finally arrived at the room, and Xiao said he had opened the cube. He didn't care about that. The boy needed to leave now or risk missing exam day. It took a moment for him to get oriented about the exam. In the exam hall, several students were gathered. Some students were pressuring the examiners to start the test already, but Yang asked them to wait because one student was still missing. The troublemakers said it didn't matter, since it was probably someone weak and without potential like him. Yang didn't like what he heard and asked the guy to repeat it. Then the big shot said it was common for the first-place winner to always come from his university, and that this year wouldn't be any different. It didn't matter if other candidates tried the test. Therefore, if the latecomer hadn't arrived yet, it was surely out of fear of participating. Hearing that, Yang said his friend could knock them all out with a single punch. Taking the bait, the guy said the little guy could try his luck, but he'd gobble him up like bread. Hearing all this, the girl wondered where Xiao had wandered off to. Mafei also stepped forward and said the only one who could rival him was Xiao, but even saying this, he was worried about his friend's absence. Not far away, Xiao was running to get to the exam hall, knowing he was late. One of the examiners asked if all the students from the 4th Academy were present. This was his last chance to arrive and participate. From afar, he shouted that he was here, to the relief of his colleagues. The man had arrived just in time. The envious ones were annoyed that an anonymous student made them wait so long. One of them tried to downplay the situation, saying he wasn't really late, and the envious ones said they were in a hurry to secure the best placements. Xiao asked where these guys crawled out from, and Yang said they were from the first university. The envious one got furious at the way he was referred to and said he'll crush Xiao in the competition. Xiao continued to dismiss them and hadn't expected the supposedly top students to have such fragile egos. Faced with this, the most offended one became completely flustered. Behind him, another student called his attention. Their goal was first place, not making trouble. This put the clown in his place. Just as they started to stir up trouble, they left as abruptly as they came. With everyone present, it was time for the exam to begin. The lead examiner took his position. He was Jin Tong, and the exam would use a point system. Victories earned 2 points, even consecutive ones. All losses deducted 1 point, but no more than 1 in a row. After the first phase, the top 10 would face off to determine the best among them. When asked if the students understood, they confirmed they did. With the instructions given, in the audience, several parents were cheering for their children. In the main arena, Xiao reflected that the rules resembled dueling ones. The minimum health was 1, and it was impossible to die. This way, he didn't need to hold back at all. An official asked Leon, who was last year's champion, who he thought would win. Naturally, he imagined it would be someone from his university. In Xiao's first match, he would face Long Myson from the first university. He looked at his opponent with calmness and serenity. The clown was delighted to meet him right at the first opportunity. Xiao said that name was funny and made a joke about the way it's pronounced. Hearing this, the clown got furious and promised to knock his teeth out. The referee asked if both were ready, to which they both confirmed. Now it was time for both of them to introduce themselves. They didn't see the point of it, though, as they were raring to start punching each other right away. Long introduced himself as a level 9 mage with electric abilities. Xiao, on the other hand, was a level 11 necromancer. Since he was level 11 and in the initial stage, the clown knew he was in trouble. Even the judge was impressed by a candidate who reached this stage before the exams. With the introductions done, they could start fighting. Confident, the clown prepared his electricity magic, believing it would be effective against the undead. Lightning began to gather around him. Xiao observed but wasn't impressed in the slightest. A large dome of electricity formed around the clown. Apparently, only 1 in 10 people could become electric mages, making it a rare skill. But to the onlookers, it seemed like he was taking a defensive position. They couldn't imagine his opponent being capable of defeating him inside his dome. The clown invited the necromancer to attack, wanting to see what he was capable of. However, he was puzzled because he hadn't seen Xiao's staff during the battle. An elder asked the director if this was the young man who Jingdu University offered a spot to without hesitation. Since he didn't seem to be here to fight, he seemed overly confident, and if he kept this up, he'd lose quickly. But the director knew this student once hit a professor and sent him flying with a single blow. In the audience, other professors were eager to see how this battle between undead and electricity unfolded. So far, neither of them had done anything offensive. Despite this, the clown remained uneasy. Xiao advanced toward him slowly, and the mage didn't understand why he hadn't summoned anything yet. Then, Xiao stepped into the dome of lightning without taking any damage. This startled the clown because it wasn't supposed to be this easy. Necromancers were supposed to be weak, but this guy was taking damage like it was nothing. In the audience, people were questioning if these were really 2 mages, because if they were, one of them was being reckless. Getting closer, Xiao put on knuckle dusters. It was time to knock out some teeth and take the opportunity to test his new equipment. Realizing he was about to be struck, the mage made his underwear unbearably heavy. The critical hit drained more health than he had. His body flew across the arena, destroying everything in its path. If it weren't for the duel rules, he'd be nothing but a smear on a shirt. Knowing how much damage he dealt, Xiao told the young man he now owed him just 5 lives. The audience was even more shocked. How could a necromancer, supposedly weak, do that with brute force? The elder wanted to question the director about how or why this happened. After all, that necromancer dealt over 1,000 damage with a single blow. The director, however, said there was nothing unusual about a necromancer being a little strong. Xiao had trained since a young age and had many aptitudes. Last year's champion was interested in him and was eager to see how skilled he was with magic. A young man rushed to his superior. He brought the news that Long was knocked out with a single punch by a 4th Academy student. The superior already knew this. The boy was strong, but now it was time to wait. Still, first place would belong to their university. The audience remained intrigued by Xiao's unreasonable strength. He couldn't possibly be a mage. After his victory, Xiao thanked those who supported and cheered for him. In the arena, a man asked Xiao to follow him, but Xiao wanted to know why he should. It was so impressive that someone accused him of cheating, and they needed to run some tests. This outraged Xiao. He couldn't believe he was being scrutinized for performing well. The man then asked how a mage like him could be so strong. Xiao replied that he was naturally strong. This explanation wasn't very convincing, and they escorted him away. As he was taken, the audience began to suspect he might have cheated. The elder also wondered if the director's student was cheating, but he asked for patience to see what happened. Mafei questioned if Xiao was cheating, but his colleague reprimanded him. The envious ones said that once Xiao was tested, they'd prove he wasn't what he claimed to be. Yang said they'll see when Xiao returned. Skeptical, they mocked the softy, saying his friend wouldn't come back. A yellow portal stood before him. The man instructed Xiao to step inside to take the test. Entering, he said that people only have doubts when faced with true geniuses. Once the test was conducted, no anomalies were detected. The man then instructed him to take the test once more. For the second time, he took the exam, and for the second time, no anomalies were detected. With that, the man ordered someone to check the equipment to ensure it was functioning correctly. While waiting, the technicians evaluated the integrity of the device. Apparently, it was working perfectly with no sign of malfunction. So, he really was capable of dealing 1,000 damage with a single punch. There had never been a mage who could do that. Now he had to take a drug test. If he passed it, he could return to the exam. Meanwhile, the second round was underway. One of the competitors believed that Xiao wouldn't return, and if time ran out, he would be automatically disqualified. In the arena, the students were preparing for their matches. The mage was waiting for his opponent, who had not yet arrived. Asking the professor, he received confirmation that if the opponent didn't show up, he would automatically win by disqualification. The one who hadn't shown up was the NECROMANCER, and the audience began to suspect he was cheating. Meanwhile, the NECROMANCER was in the bathroom. A man followed him, needing to witness the urine collection. Closing the door, the NECROMANCER remarked that he feared scaring the man. However, the man insisted he was a trained professional. The two were inside the stall. Upon exiting, the man was traumatized by what he had witnessed. Returning to his supervisor, the man reported that Xiao's results were all clean. That was enough to allow him to return to the exam. Looking at his file, the supervisor recognized him as the son of Xiao Anqing. Certainly, he was bound to deliver many surprises. Yang was already worried about the risk of his friend being disqualified. The envious one said that he wouldn't return and had probably already been expelled without anyone knowing. The girl pointed out that he was only investigated because of a report, likely made by them, but she admitted she had no proof it was them. And besides, it wouldn't matter if he were actually cheating. That level of damage was completely disproportionate, and it was natural for anyone to question its validity. Yang continued to believe in his friend's innocence, and that he would return soon. The envious ones insisted they were delusional, saying Xiao wouldn't return under any circumstances. Mafei remarked that they were desperate to take first place, but it wouldn't work, even with Xiao out of the competition. He was determined to win. Then the girl announced that Xiao had arrived. After passing all the tests, he was heading toward the arena. The referee was preparing to declare a win by disqualification, but Xiao asked him to wait. Despite the delay, he had arrived. Since both candidates were present, it was time to begin. As before, Xiao introduced himself to his opponent. Seeing that Xiao had returned, the audience began to believe he hadn't cheated and truly was capable of dealing such immense damage. The envious ones now had to swallow their words in silence. Seeing Xiao's return in the arena, Xiao's opponent said there was no need for introductions. Since he had arrived, he would make a move, but before the match could start, the opponent forfeited. He didn't want to risk taking a punch capable of dealing 1,000 damage. But Xiao chased after him, trying to convince him otherwise. This surprised the referee, and Xiao gained a few more points with the forfeit. He now had a total of 5 points. His friends went to the arena to talk to him. At the headquarters of the envious ones, they lamented that the necromancer had returned and didn't know what to do next. Reporting him had only been a tactic to buy time. If he hadn't cheated, he would inevitably come back. But that wasn't their only scheme to try and get him eliminated. No one was going to take first place from them. With that, Xiao's next battle began. Just like his previous opponent, his current one forfeited before the fight could start. This irritated Xiao, as he was eager to crush some faces. However, his opponent insisted he didn't want to experience the pain of 1,000 damage punch. The same happened in the 4th round, much to Xiao's frustration. This continued until the 8th match. Xiao, who had been hoping to face someone, was disheartened by the situation. If things kept going this way, he would enter the 2nd phase with a perfect score. But the envious ones planned to pit him against a professor from the 2nd Academy in the 9th round. It remained to be seen whether she would follow their plan. All they needed was to start the fight. The rest would depend on her decision to win or not. And so it began. Professor Surang would fight against Xiao. In the audience, the crowd went wild over the beauty of the woman in the arena. It was time for them to introduce themselves. The woman was an ice mage, level 11. Among the directors, an old man commented that Xiao was in a tough spot now, but the director, Su, reinforced the idea that they didn't know how strong Xiao really was. Xiao introduced himself as a level 11 necromancer. After the introductions, the professor's staff immediately started glowing. This surprised Xiao because up until now she didn't seem like someone who would give up. Calmly, she said there was no reason for her to back down now. Hearing this, Xiao became excited since it was the first time someone hadn't given up after knowing how strong he was. In the audience, the crowd got upset, assuming he'd fight dirty against such a beautiful woman. Hearing the boos, he responded that he wouldn't go all out against someone so beautiful. Then he pulled out the item he got from the magic cube. It was so unusual that the referee couldn't believe Xiao was actually a necromancer. On the other hand, the professor became apprehensive as she'd never seen a mage fight this way. Wielding the spear, Xiao moved to attack. As a defense, the mage conjured an ice wall to protect herself. Ice rose from the ground, attempting to trap Xiao, but with a simple movement of the spear, he shattered it completely. Feeling him getting closer, she knew she wouldn't stand a chance if he got too near. Still, she was confident her abilities would be enough to restrain him, even if only for a few moments. Leaping forward, Xiao tried to close the distance for close combat. The professor had been waiting for this moment. When he was off the ground, she said he was powerful but too confident, and now this streak of victories would come to an end. Before he could land, he was already surrounded by the ice she summoned. His body was nearly completely encased in ice. With this, he became trapped in a massive block of ice, entirely immobilized. In the audience, people praised her strategy and agreed she was clearly superior to a student. The directors believed the fight was over, but Su told them to keep watching. Speaking with the referee, she asked if she had won the match, but he told her to look at her opponent. Xiao's health was steadily decreasing, but hadn't reached 0 yet. So the mage approached the block of ice. As she got closer, Xiao's face was already visible. She suggested he surrender, saying he'd lost, but through the cold, Xiao replied he refused to give up. To her, he was just enduring unnecessary pain, and soon his health would drop to 0. But Xiao knew that with his current health, it would take some time. Forcing his way out of the ice, cracks started to form in the block. To prevent this, the mage tried to produce more ice to restrain him. Once again, he was trapped, but the professor recognized that to have broken the ice, he must be abnormally strong. Her efforts didn't stop him from freeing his head from the ice again, and now he wondered how much mana she had left. Her mana was already depleted, while his health still appeared to be full. Unable to maintain the ice trapping him, Xiao finally broke free from his frozen prison. Without mana, she could only watch in disbelief at what had just happened before her eyes. Once free and with her mana drained, Xiao pointed his spear at her. He gently invited her to surrender the match, but she refused to do so. The blunt side of Xiao's blade was about to strike her head. The professor was sent flying, taking 260 damage. Her crowd went wild at the seemingly brutal act. Xiao, however, couldn't care less about their reaction. After all, this was a competition. The battle finally ended with Xiao emerging as the winner of the round. The directors were utterly incredulous, and Su declared that this year, Xiao would be the champion. No one could stop him. A student rushed to aid her professor, noting that her score was enough to advance to the next stage. The problem, however, was that young man, who wasn't a mage and insulted the competition by being here. This irritated Xiao, as it wasn't his fault he was a mage focused on close combat and much stronger than all of them. At the stronghold of the envious ones, they no longer knew what to do. Xiao was undefeated and advancing to the second phase of the exam. The envious leader called the professor useless, saying he would have to take matters into his own hands now. A student asked the professor what she thought of the fight and commented that Xiao's strength was extraordinarily unusual. She had seen the fight schedule, and Xiao wasn't supposed to be her opponent. Someone had deliberately altered it. This made her think someone wanted her out of the second phase, but she soon realized the real target was Xiao. She wondered whether she should tell him. She decided to approach him and share what she had discovered. She told him what had happened and urged him to be cautious because this person was likely still after him. Instead of worrying, this motivated him even more to send this person flying with a single blow. With the first phase over, people prepared for the second stage. The candidates who passed the first stage gathered together. The arena battles were finally about to begin. These were the top 10, and the audience was divided between thinking Xiao would win or that he was just a cheater. He was the first to step into the arena, but in reality, he was just waiting for the one trying to sabotage him from the shadows. Positioned in the center of the arena, the audience speculated that he intended to take on all 9 opponents at once. Behind him, a tremendous enthusiast made his entrance. The newcomer claimed that only a genius could secure first place, and he was one. Before he could react, he was slapped across the face, losing 354 health points. Xiao reaffirmed his statement. That guy wasn't a genius. The audience was increasingly amazed, convinced that this remarkable young man would be the winner. His victories were so overwhelming that the crowd no longer hesitated to cheer for him. His name was being chanted, but all he cared about was the emergence of the one trying to sabotage him. The envious one approached and called him a crowd pleaser, nothing more. Then he made Xiao a proposal of 5 million. Xiao didn't understand, so the envious one clarified, it was an offer of 5 million, in exchange for Xiao withdrawing. He pointed out that Xiao was an orphan. His parents hadn't left him any significant inheritance, and that amount could change his life. Feeling insulted, Xiao said, "Dreams can't be priced. Or rather, they could, but not for such a paltry sum." Seeing a possibility, the envious one asked how much more Xiao wanted. He would consider giving up for 1 billion, but wouldn't refuse 100 billion if offered. That amount was out of the envious one's budget, so he declared he would deal with Xiao harshly instead. Xiao wanted to understand why he was so hated. Deciding this must be the envious one, he prepared. Like Xiao, the guy was at the initial stage and was a shadow mage. It was the first shadow mage Xiao had ever encountered. The battle was about to begin. Xiao was excited. He'd finally get to mess up the envious one's face. With one hand, the guy summoned his shadow magic. Shadows began forming around the arena, taking on humanoid shapes. The guy extended his hand toward Xiao. The battle between a necromancer and a shadow mage left the audience ecstatic. They wanted Xiao to summon his undead, but he said he didn't need them. He was more than enough to handle the situation on his own. Wielding his spear, Xiao waited for the shadows to get close enough to him. When the first one entered his range, he struck it hard, but he noticed something. They were different, more solid than he had expected. These shadows had bones of steel and iron. This was the first stage of what the envious one had prepared to defeat Xiao. But Xiao wasn't intimidated and kept fighting, hitting the shadows, which could do nothing to defend themselves. If that was all there was, it wouldn't be a problem. Solid or not, it didn't matter. He was motivated to see if his strength could break one of them. With a powerful vertical strike, he aimed to slice one of the shadows. Despite the strength of the blow, his blade couldn't completely cut through it. Since his blade was already near its neck, he struck what appeared to be a weak spot. Now only 3 shadows remained to be dealt with. The envious one struggled to believe the sheer physical strength of Xiao. If someone told him Xiao was a monster, he would believe it. Meanwhile, another shadow lost its head to Xiao's blade. It didn't take long for all the shadows to cease existing. Now it was the envious one's turn to face the edge of the blade. As Xiao approached for the attack, the envious one stated that he didn't summon those shadows for combat. They were sacrifices. And he began the process of assimilating them. Before anything else could happen, Xiao's blade struck the envious one's arm. If it weren't for the tournament rules, that shadow mage would already be claiming his parking space in the afterlife. However, Xiao noticed something strange happening to his arm. The mage acknowledged Xiao's strength, admitting he was the first to force him to use shadows as sacrifices. It seemed that any direct attack on him would reflect damage onto the attacker. Drawing a dagger, the mage warned that even without being attacked, Xiao wouldn't be safe. He then used the short weapon to injure himself. The damage transferred to Xiao, costing him 50 health points. The Envious One promised to fulfill his initial promise if Xiao admitted defeat. Despite the challenging situation, Xiao refused. Meanwhile, the Envious One noticed that a blow to Xiao's chest wasn't enough to drain his health entirely. He continued to injure himself, commenting that Xiao was stubborn and shouldn't blame him for the pain he was about to feel. The pain Xiao experienced from those strikes was very real. Now, the mage prepared to target an extremely sensitive part of the male anatomy, displaying no ethics whatsoever. This deeply unsettled Xiao, forcing him to react quickly with his spear, severing the mage's arm. The Envious One was forced to retreat and used the shadow sacrifice and assimilation process again. As a result, Xiao suffered another 496 damage points. In this situation, having high attack power was no advantage. Xiao needed to figure out the limitations of the mage's ability. Perhaps it was tied to the dark aura surrounding him. He then understood the mage's abilities, and that with the next move, the fight would end. With one hand concealed, the Envious One taunted, inviting him to try anything he liked. Facing him, Xiao executed a strike that didn't hit, but caused a displacement in the air nearby. Xiao asked if the mage really thought he wouldn't see through the enchantment. Now it was time to see if the mage could dodge the attack. The Envious One declared that if he did, he'd call Xiao Daddy. The punch was already prepared, ready to crush the mage's face. The mage summoned a technique. The defense withstood the first impact of Xiao's punch. It seemed Xiao's guess was correct. Otherwise, the mage wouldn't have needed to defend. However, the mage insisted that defending wasn't the same as dodging. Wasting no time, Xiao continued striking, causing the Envious One to lose 125 health points. The shield could withstand hits from an average boss, but it crumbled under Xiao's strength. The Envious One couldn't accept that Xiao was stronger than a boss. Calmly advancing, Xiao declared it was time to end this. But the mage retorted that he'd be the one to finish the fight. A massive volume of shadows gathered around the mage, larger than ever before. They began to engulf his body, and the color of his eyes changed. The transformation was astounding, drawing Xiao's attention. In this form, even a player with strong physical attributes would be no match for him, and neither would Xiao. The Envious One was determined to secure first place in the exam, convinced that Xiao's end was near. Without time to react, Xiao lunged at him with a kick, delivering a subtle ambush. The Envious One was sent flying across the arena, kicking up dust and destroying everything in his path. However, his body was much more solid now. Merging with the shadows had made him significantly more resilient. The Envious One didn't appreciate the surprise kick and was now ready to return the favor. As he got close enough, Xiao prepared another one of his punches. Their hands collided in the arena. The force of the impact reverberated through the air, breaking the ground beneath them. This caused Xiao to lose footing. With one of his legs mid-air, he was forced to defend against a kick heading his way. Before he could return to the ground, his ankle was grabbed. Even so, Xiao was not surprised at all by his opponent's strength. From the air, he struck him in the face with ease. Once again, the Envious One was thrown, this time breaking the ground with his body. The audience didn't understand, as a mage duel had turned into a hand-to-hand fight. Observing the battle were two mysterious figures. They were assassins, now certain that this was not Mafei, but actually the Xiao they were searching for, and that they must bring him to Baiji. The Shadow Mage wondered how Xiao was capable of matching his strength in this state, and what magic he used to achieve it. Matching, this word didn't define the situation between them. Within himself, the Envious One thought his ability was nearing its end. Now he had no other choice. He used his Devouring Shadows sacrifice technique. His director was concerned and ordered him not to use it under any circumstances, but he refused to give up the fight, wanting to prove he was stronger than his brother. His brother was last year's champion, and this had placed undue pressure on him for a healthy competition. Unconcerned with his personal drama, Xiao just wanted him to attack already. With this new ability, the Envious One struck, causing Xiao to lose 141 health points while declaring that his end was near. But despite the damage, Xiao remained fine and capable. He retaliated with his own strike, hitting the transformed mage's face. In the middle of the arena, the two exchanged relentless blows. One of the referees expressed concern and asked if the exam overseer would allow this to continue, to which he replied, just a bit longer. A hidden woman spoke into a radio, instructing her team to prepare to capture the two. The enraged mage didn't understand why Xiao was still resisting, and Xiao said the same. The mage was stronger than any boss he's ever faced. The fight continued with fury on the mage's side and a wide smile on the necromancer's face. But one fighter's abilities were nearing their limit, and Xiao landed a precise punch on the envious one. The layer of shadows surrounding him shattered, and the envious one wondered if he had truly been defeated. It seemed that Xiao had won, and the referee prepared to announce the result. Then something happened in the arena, alarming the organizers. The chief exam organizer shouted at someone, saying they were courting disaster. Xiao didn't understand what was happening, but from the gleam in his eyes, it was clear someone was approaching. A truck fled the competition venue. Inside it were several students who participated in the second phase, including Xiao. He finally woke up, wondering what happened. The envious one, whose name was Gu, was there, as was the professor who fought him. It seemed the best candidates had been kidnapped. A hooded woman approached him, saying she regretted bringing him in this way. Xiao remarked that if this was her way of inviting people, she should refine her method. She told him not to fear. She was the leader of Baiji in this city, and her name was Gusi. It was because of Xiao's abilities that she had to abduct him. Yang and Mafei, also present, didn't recognize the name Baiji. It was a bold move by this organization to act in the middle of the exam. The professor stated that the repercussions of this action would be enormous and demanded they be released immediately. But the woman insisted they would be freed as soon as they reached their destination and assured them there was no risk as long as they remained calm. However, anyone who tried to escape would find out firsthand whether God exists. The question among them was why they were all abducted. Just as universities need good prospects, her organization did too. One of the captives stood up, saying he'd never heard of them and demanded to be freed immediately. The woman kicked him in the stomach, knocking him to the ground. She said they had no choice. Once they witnessed the power of the organization, they would join willingly. If they refused, they wouldn't live. If they were smart enough, they would realize the correct choice. The cuffs were special, and they shouldn't even think about escaping to the inner world. Leaving the room, the door closed behind her. Earlier, the professors had fought, and the chief organizer asked who these people were. His arrows struck a young man, but that was one of the exam workers. There was an infiltrator among them, but the top priority was to rescue those who were taken. An expert level 35 archer, who would have thought the chief examiner would turn out to be him. The man prepared his bow, not knowing who the young man was, and the latter said he didn't intend to reveal his identity. Arrows were fired toward the hostile intruder, but it wasn't his body. It was just a mirage. Distracted, the chief examiner was struck. The young man remarked that the old examiner was hot-headed, a surefire way to meet an untimely end. The rubble covering him flew into the air as he stood up. Soon, the same thing happened to the entire ground around them. As the dust began to settle, something unfolded. The chief examiner finally freed himself from his restraints. Two of his subordinates arrived to check on his health, and he assured them he was fine, but wanted to know where the intruders were. They escaped with 10 students, and the subordinates failed to stop them. Hearing this, the examiner demanded to know which 10 students were captured. After hearing their names, he became deeply enraged. 2 directors approached him, explaining that since the captives were prodigies, they were not in immediate danger. This was so well orchestrated that it was no ordinary organization behind it, not in the middle of an exam. Another subordinate approached, reporting that the same thing happened in other cities. The examiner ordered an investigation, prioritizing the students' safety. In the truck's container, Xiao examined the special shackles. One student, a physical cultivator, said those shackles shouldn't be able to hold him. He struggled to break free, but the chains remained intact. On the other hand, Xiao easily freed himself, commenting on the poor quality of his shackles, much to the physical cultivator's surprise. With his spear in hand, Xiao offered to help free the others. Using the blade, he quickly broke their restraints. One student remained shackled, the envious one. Using his abilities, he insisted he didn't need Xiao's help as he struggled to free himself. Xiao cut through the truck's wall. Now the students had a clear path to escape. A mysterious woman heard the suspicious noise. She immediately ordered the truck to stop. As she stepped out, she found the students already outside. Once again, they faced each other. Not even a level 20 physical cultivator could remove those shackles, and she demanded to know how they managed it. Xiao quipped that if he told her, she wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Before she could say anything more, they were teleported away. Frustrated, she fired her quad-barreled weapon. The blast shattered the ground beneath them. They were in the inner world now, but once they returned, help would have arrived. Furious, she vowed not to forget Xiao's name. In the secret world, they had an E-rank mission, to stop the resurrection of a demon. His companions had disappeared, likely transported to random locations. For now, he considered destroying the NPC's device, thinking it might allow him to move freely. Something triggered his alertness. A young man told his master that the deity of pleasure had risen from the dead, but the master refused to believe it, saying such a thing was impossible. When a body turned malevolent, it became covered in fur, and its teeth and nails elongated. The young man insisted he saw this, but the master reiterated that the deity couldn't have done such a thing. Xiao thought that if he followed these NPCs, he'd quickly reach the core of the world's story. He continued walking, pretending to be a reanimated corpse. Now, they were all inside a house. The master announced he needed to leave and instructed his student to watch over the deity of pleasure. The student began praying for the deity not to rise from the dead. As he prayed, the door was kicked open by newcomers. The new arrivals were carrying what looked like a sarcophagus. The old man noticed a restraining talisman and demanded to know the boy's relationship with the corpse shepherd, Susen. The boy replied that Sushi was his master and asked if the old man was a coffin bearer. Laughing, the old man remarked that Sushen's disciple had some discernment. He wanted to know where the boy's master was, and the boy explained that he had to leave but would return soon. Examining the body, the old man speculated it must have died recently, as the skin was firm and still warm. The boy warned that he shouldn't offend the deity of pleasure, as it could have dire consequences. The other man scoffed, saying, "It's just a body, and there are no consequences for what they said." "Only body shepherds think like that," he retorted, adding that if the man tried anything, he'd make his club sing on his head. But the disciple insisted that such actions would be an enormous disrespect. Observing the body, the man noted its fine features, estimating it would be worth a lot of money, and ordered Fenglai to grab it. Hearing the command, Fenglai moved toward the body, to the surprise of the boy standing there. In response, the boy stepped in his way, refusing to let the body be stolen. Ignoring the boy's words, Fenglai slapped him across the face. The boy declared that if Fenglai continued trying to steal the body, he'd do everything he could to protect it. Seeing the boy's small size, Fenglai felt no intimidation at all. Knowing the boy would interfere, he kneed him in the stomach. The force of the impact threw the boy far away. The man continued walking, commenting that the boy was too small and fragile to do anything. Xiao, pretending to be a body, didn't like what he saw. His reaction was noticed by the boy guarding him, as well as the two men who arrived later. Removing the seal from his head, Xiao sighed. It was regrettable, he thought, that Fenglai harmed the boy over something so trivial. Seeing what they thought was a body moving, the boy exclaimed that the deity of pleasure had returned from the dead. Xiao hadn't intended to intervene, but needed to reach Coffin Mountain and wouldn't let those two sell him. Sensing an attack, the older man used a poison technique, but it was completely ineffective as Xiao's fist met his face. The older man's body flew through the air, crashing into the hard floor of the house. Only now did he realize that this wasn't a body but a living person. Fenglai assumed it was some kind of trick and was undeterred as he attacked. His club landed squarely on Xiao's face. Despite the impact, the result was almost negligible, leaving Xiao surprised. Seeing such resilience, the old man could no longer tell if this was a living person or just a body. Looking at Xiao's status, even he was unsure. He was a reanimated body with 100 extra defense but didn't regenerate health or mana. This was why the body reanimating bell made him act without a will of his own, and with high health, he was fine since he didn't use mana. The old man ordered his disciple to hold Xiao off while he prepared a body suppression technique. Once again, the man moved to attack the reanimated body. Xiao also prepared to strike, unimpressed. His devastating blow sent Funglai sinking into the ground. Even though he defended, Funglai told his master he couldn't hold out much longer and hoped he was ready. The cunning old man had already fled the scene. Funglai was upset at being abandoned without explanation. Xiao told him not to worry, as the old man wouldn't escape the situation. Leaving Funglai behind, Xiao chased after the old man. One strike was enough to permanently retire the elder. Now only the other man remained, utterly disheartened by the situation. But Xiao hadn't forgotten the man either. Smashing his face into the ground, Xiao gained experience and attribute points for defeating both. Now he was curious about the object they were carrying. It looked like a spirit suppression coffin. With one hand, he opened it to see what was inside. Inside was his companion, the paladin. Of all people, he didn't expect to find someone he knew and recognized her by her slim frame. Waking up, she wasn't pleased to be recognized for that particular trait. Apparently, they were now part of the dungeon mission, which was why they became bodies. The boy nearby couldn't believe there was another reanimated deity. Taking advantage of his presence, Xiao addressed him. The boy asked what they needed from him, and Xiao said they needed to go to Coffin Mountain, coincidentally the same destination the boy and his master were headed to. After some time, the boy's master returned. The boy claimed he captured the deity himself, and the master asked how he could have managed such a feat. They still had a long journey ahead of them. Elsewhere, monks walked with coffins, seals floating around them as one chanted a prayer aloud. Xiao observed his surroundings carefully. The master spoke to one of them and ordered him to enter, saying the others would arrive soon. Handing a bell to his disciple, he instructed him to take care of the deities. Holding the bell, the disciple shook it gently. In the direction they were heading, there were more bodies of others who had been part of the exam. Yang noticed that 2 of his friends were arriving. Xiao felt happy to reunite with them in that place. To the boy's astonishment, the bodies began talking to each other. It seemed impossible that all those deities could be alive. Elsewhere, the elders were gathered, and one of them asked if they were all prepared for the deities of pleasure. This was the 5th time they were summoning the spirits, and he hoped they were all adequately prepared. That night, they planned to venture into the emperor's tomb. As the night progressed, a moon rose high in the sky, illuminating the area. The monks' procession continued its journey. They all gathered now in front of the emperor's tomb. The cold night wind blew through them. With all the deities present, one of them asked if they could leave now. The head monk asked the speaker where he intended to go. Confused, the monk asked what he meant by that. The time had come, and the supreme ruler would return. With the bodies there, it was time for the divine emperor to descend. Using human blood as a sacrifice, they welcomed the emperor. Hearing these words, the monks were horrified. They hadn't known they would be used as sacrifices. Trying to flee the head monk was futile. Those who valued their lives were urged to flee while there was still time, but escape was impossible. They weren't going anywhere now. The entire area was surrounded by reanimated bodies. The zombies not only attacked the monks, but also prevented their escape. These were corrupted bodies, and the old monk realized the head monk had planned all this. Seeing the chaos, Ju asked Xiao what they should do. They needed to prevent the demon's resurrection. Perhaps this was the figure the monk referred to as the Divine Emperor. If that were the case, they had to attack. And so they began taking down the corrupted bodies. The head monk noticed that the bodies had entered the tomb, finally allowing the emperor to return. Examining the ongoing battle more closely, doubts arose about the bodies. They seemed alive. Enraged, the head monk grew increasingly agitated, furious at the interference with his plans. Using his brush, a malicious elder began chanting an incantation. Meanwhile, Xiao was surrounded by corrupted bodies. Feeling his movement slow, he realized his body was succumbing to an incantation affecting reanimated corpses. Armed with his spear, he prepared to strike at the source of the spell. A spear was thrown, piercing through several bodies toward the malicious elder. But the elder continued chanting. As the spell concluded, he commanded 10,000 hidden bodies. Feeling the ground shift beneath them, Xiao's companions were terrified. In truth, something had happened, and none of them could move. They should be frightened, though, as their bodies were the perfect nourishment for the Emperor's return. The situation was dire. If it continued, the demon would be revived at any moment. Looking at the monk who had accompanied him from the beginning, Xiao reminded him they were there to stop the demon's resurrection. Hearing this, the monk refused to believe it was a demon being resurrected. The demon of their legends burned everything around him, one of the 4 great ancestors of the corpses, the dry demon. Whether it was human, corpse, or deity, the most important thing now was to stop the resurrection. Using his magic, the monk removed the curse restricting him. For a short time, spells affecting reanimated corpses would have no effect on him. That was enough. As long as he was there, the demon wouldn't leave its tomb. Looking at the other monks, the elder asked what they were waiting for. Pulling themselves together, they began freeing all the reanimated bodies. Desperate, the malicious elder declared that no one could stop the resurrection of his master. Xiao was confident he could. Striking the elder with all his strength, the elder's body lay motionless atop the objects that had stopped him. Now, under no circumstances could the sarcophagus come into contact with human blood. It was too late. The evil elder's blood had made contact with it. An evil hand burst from the ground. The dragon's breath was being born once more, and the system alerted them that the demon had been resurrected. Their mission had now changed. Mafei stared at the ethereal figure that appeared before them, amazed. The same astonishment was reflected on the others' faces, except for Xiao. They now had to defeat this demon, as the mission difficulty had risen to level D, an epic-level boss at level 20 with 4,000 health and 223 strength. Some of the monks present began to flee, realizing there was nothing they could do against the demon. The demon's eyes locked onto one of the fleeing men. He quickly chased after him, the man in utter despair. Not far from him, the demon noticed a young man nearby. The man approached Xiao, hoping to distract the demon so someone else would be targeted instead of him. Understanding what happened, Xiao grew furious at the cowardly monk. Now the demon stood before him, ready to attack. But before it could do anything to Xiao, he struck it head-on. The demon flew as if it had wings. After slamming into a wall, it briefly recovered. From its mouth, it released a poisonous mist. The mist passed by Xiao, nearly hitting him directly. The paladin, Zhu, warned him that it was highly toxic and urged him to be careful. The ice mage acted quickly, casting her magic. Her ice enveloped both the mist and the demon. Meanwhile, the healer restored the health Xiao had lost with minimal effort. The demon shattered the ice, imprisoning it. One of the students considered using shadow magic. Appearing suddenly beside the demon, he slashed it with his blade. Judging by the monster's expression, the attack was ineffective, but it was enough to enrage the demon. Using an ability, the demon halved all the player's attributes. Now, Xiao's health was reduced by half. Unsure of what to do, they realized they had to cooperate to defeat the demon with their reduced attributes. A massive wave of debris flew in front of them. It was Xiao, striking the demon with his fists. This shocked the boy, as the necromancer's attack dealt 10 times the damage of his strongest blow. After being hit, the demon retaliated, striking Xiao. The force of the blow sent him flying. Yang rushed to his aid, asking what they should do next, since none of them could break through the boss's defense. Near Xiao was the envious one, so Xiao approached the man. Cunningly, he kicked him toward the demon, forcing him to act. The shadow mage was nearly upon the demon. Realizing he needed to respond, the mage summoned his shadows. Before being struck, he conjured a barrier to protect himself. Watching this, Xiao hadn't expected such an ability to be so useful in this situation. The monster fought against the shadow mage. Finally, the student used his shadow sacrifice ability. This allowed him to take the demon's blow directly. The impact was so strong that the ground beneath his feet gave way. On the front lines, the shadow mage continued enduring the demon's retaliation. Meanwhile, the other 2 mages prepared their spells. The professor announced she was almost ready. Once her spell was charged, she unleashed a powerful ice magic. Simultaneously, Yang cast his restriction magic. The resurrected demon was struck by both spells. Xiao was impressed by the shadow mage's resilience, as he continued enduring the demon's blows. Yang declared he was out of mana. Now, everything depended on Xiao. Xiao advanced swiftly toward the boss. His hand was about to strike the hideous figure's face. The blow was devastating. The demon's face was utterly disfigured. As if one hit weren't enough, Xiao continued to pummel him relentlessly. The barrage of punches was so intense that the demon resembled a defenseless child. After taking such a beating, the demon finally decided to fight back. Now it screamed in outrage, declaring that not even its father had beaten it like this. It was time to return the blows in the cruelest way possible. Unlike the demon, Xiao didn't stand still waiting to be hit. He quickly counterattacked. Once again, the demon's body flew into the nearest wall. Slowly, it got up, but it was futile. Xiao was already upon it, ready to end its life. But the monk said Xiao could not do it. He must be the one to handle it. However, words were incapable of stopping a body descending from the air, and the demon's face slammed into the ground once again. The mission was completed, and Xiao's performance was rated as A. In addition to the attributes and experience gained, he leveled up once more. Finally, the monk revealed that anyone who kills the demon will be cursed. As they conversed, the demon's body began to slowly disappear. A reddish mist formed from what was once the body, and the monk warned Xiao to be careful with it. The mist coalesced before him. The system notified Xiao that he was now cursed and would die in 30 days. He asked the monk if there was a way to reverse it, but the monk said there was nothing about this in historical records. His friends asked if he was all right, and he said yes, but he was considering whether someone at the university might know how to deal with it. Yang told him that the soul core had formed. The envious one thanked Xiao for his effort while taking the item for himself. Since he was once tricked, it was time to return the favor. The item was A-level, capable of stealing half the target's agility for 10 seconds. Yang was upset with him, knowing he barely did anything yet kept the item. While scolding Yang for complaining, the envious one tried to exit the secret world, but he didn't succeed. Yang was restraining him with his magic. As Yang held him back, he urged Xiao to act quickly. The envious one insisted he didn't want to fight them, but Yang's magic wouldn't hold him for long. Xiao was already moving toward the troublemaker. If that's how it was, they'd fight once more, and he'd debut his new item on him. The envious one stole half of Xiao's agility, gaining an underwhelming 4.5 points. That miserable amount surprised even the envious one. Without the curse of the corpses, a single blow was enough to take him down. While flying through the air, he could only think about how much health Xiao must have to keep fighting. However, he managed to recover and land on his feet. This wasn't the exam. Without agility, they wouldn't catch him. He bid them farewell once again, but once more, he was prevented from teleporting, this time by the ice magic of the professor. She hadn't forgotten what he did to her during the exam. With his bruised charisma, the Shadow Mage had made enemies of all of them. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, he used the shadow sacrifice, but being struck by Xiao caused him to lose a significant portion of his health. He was thrown far away, while the ring fell into Xiao's possession. Nearly out of strength, he finally left, promising revenge. The item appeared to be interesting and would surely be useful in the future. Xiao thanked the professor, who warned him that the envious one was vindictive and he should be careful with him. With that, they all teleported out of the dungeon. Xiao was now level 12, incredibly strong, and with lots of health. Back in the real world, a rescue team was waiting for them. Not far away, the chief examiner was relieved that they've all returned. The directors gathered with the rescued students. The examiner promised them an explanation for what happened. None of those responsible would escape justice, as the incident was extremely serious. For safety reasons, the exam was suspended, and the students would be escorted back to their universities. Before parting, the professor reminded Xiao once more about the envious one, but Xiao assured her he was immune to troublemakers. In a castle shrouded in night, a woman knelt before what appeared to be her master. She reported that they escaped from the secret world. The master had encountered Xiao before and found nothing remarkable about him, but now he realized Xiao was indeed the son of Xiao Anqing. He was growing more interested in this young man. At Xiao's university, life went on as usual. The bus carrying the students had just arrived. Xiao and his friends stepped off the bus after their journey. They were greeted by Professor Pang, who was pleased they had managed to escape. Speaking with Pang, Xiao requested a meeting with Director Ji, as he had something important to discuss. In the director's office, Ji waited to hear what the young man had to say. In the last dungeon, Xiao was cursed by the boss, and a mark appeared on his arm. The director quickly realized the nature of the curse. It was a death curse, and Xiao had only 30 days to live. Pang was alarmed by this diagnosis and wondered if it was truly what would happen. The safest thing they could do was to find the Sage's Protection, an S-level item, but it wasn't available on the market. The Sage's Protection was something he once had but had to use. If someone else possessed it now, it would hardly be up for sale. The director contacted some connections, but none of them had the item. So, Xiao wanted to know if there was another alternative. There was, but with his current strength, it was impossible, and it would be better for him to make the most of his remaining days. Still, Xiao wanted to try doing something to save his own life. Categorically, the director warned him that if he attempted this other route, it would lead to his death, but Xiao insisted, saying he had no other choice. The director revealed it was in a D-level dungeon. Xiao had faced E-difficulty monsters in E-level dungeons before, but a D-level dungeon was entirely different. There was no comparison between them, and anyone entering D-level dungeons was already at the intermediate stage. Even though his equipment wasn't low-level, Xiao began hiding his items. The director clarified that he had no interest in a student's loot. However, Xiao wanted to know what dungeon it was because he intended to go there. Hearing these words, the director grew irritated, releasing his energy in the room. Xiao took 500 damage without the professor moving a muscle. His eyes burned as if they were being cut. Even so, to the director's surprise, the boy was still standing, unlike the other professor in the room. This prompted him to ask once more for the dungeon's name. Before answering, the director healed the student's health. "It's the Lake of Purification," he said. Entering this lake could cleanse all negative statuses a player had. Xiao thanked him for the information, and the director urged him to be cautious since no beginner-stage players were found there. Xiao promised to be careful and said he understood everything. After the conversation, he announced he was heading to the dungeon, but the director asked him to wait a bit longer. He handed him an item to wear, explaining it would help him in that place.